I call to order the City of Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals for March the 21st, 2024. Can we please have roll call?
Allard.
Here.
Burrell. Here. Clapper.
Yes, here.
Throckmorton.
Here. Also, we're getting a big echo. Could we fix that? You hear echo.
There's an echo.
Big.
In the meantime, we have approval of minutes, the January 18th and the February 22nd meeting minutes.
I'm going to move approval of January 18th, 2024, February 22nd, 2024 without further discussion on the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any? Oh, we lost the feed?
Hold on,
Sorry. I thought I was helping by muting.
Ah.
But I did not help.
So are we good to continue?
no. Yeah. It's like where how did we lose?
What did you do?
I muted Council Chambers.
Oh, can you unmute it?
Unmute.
No, you have to.
Oh.
Up here.
Oh, yeah. Click that button.
Ooh.
Oh, that's better.
Right.
That actually make the meeting interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try now.
Are we ready for roll call?
We are ready. We have a motion and a second. So could we please have a vote?
Burrell. Yes. Throckmorton.
Yes.
Clapper.
Yes.
Ballard.
Yes.
Okay. The minutes are approved. Do we have any reports, resolutions, and communications?
No, we do not.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. The petitions that are continued to the April 18th meeting are as follows. AA-17-22, Joe Kemp Construction, LLC, and Blackwell Construction, Inc. V-05-24, Candy Sipes. And V-2722, Cutters Kirkwood 123, LLC. This evening, we have three petitions. The first is V-0224, Mohsen Kianizadeh and Sarah Nori Hosseini. We have V-0324, Brian Rental, Inc., and V-0624, Ace 318, LLC. We are ready to move forward with a staff report for V-02-24 when you are ready.
Okay. My name is Gabriel Holbrow, zoning planner for the city of Bloomington, here to present for V-02-04. Sorry, V-02-24. Let me pull up the presentation.
Notation's incorrect because it says
Yes, so on the first page of the packet, it's case number V-02-04. The later headings on later pages are corrected.
Okay, I just wanted to
Apologize for that error.
point that out. Okay.
Yes, this case did not start 20 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
All right, here we are. This petition is for property at 2214 East Maxwell Lane. It's on the east side of town on a dead-end portion of Maxwell to the east of High Street. It's in the R2 zoning district. The property is 0.61 acres approximately, R2 zoning district. Comprehensive plan designation is neighborhood residential. And the existing land use is undeveloped. Proposed land use would be a single family detached dwelling. There is a lot of information in the packet about the history, the very recent history of what's going on here. But I want to just consolidate to the core issue here, which is this is a drawing of the property. It's turned on its side, so north is to the left. Maxwell Lane is now running up and down on the left side there. It actually runs east-west. And this shows a footprint of a house that could go on the property. There's no house there right now. This is an idea of one. And around the middle of the property, there's a stream that runs generally from west to east across the property. And there are stream buffers that are riparian buffer zones that apply in the UDO. There are 3 of them, each 25 feet on their own. They add up to 75 feet. There's the stream side zone, that's 25 feet to either side. The intermediate zone, another 25 feet. And the fringe zone, another 25 feet. So as you can see, this is, by the way, this is approximate. These aren't where the lines exactly are, but for illustrative purposes, to put up on the screen. As you can see, a proposed footprint for the house would fall within those buffer zones. So the request is for relief from these riparian buffer zones, and as staff understands it, relief would be from the fringe zone and intermediate zone to the north of the stream to allow for buildable area for a house such as this footprint. The petitioner's statement, the petitioner's statement, recently looking at it this afternoon, I realized doesn't explicitly state which of the zones and how much they're requesting relief from. Staff's understanding is that this is the request. The petitioner can correct or can clarify that if necessary. The petitioner's statement also asks for a temporary variance in the remaining 25-foot streamside zone on the north side of the stream. You'll see as we go to the recommended findings, staff recommends findings that show relief from the fringe and intermediate buffer zones are justified by the variance criteria, but even any relief, including any temporary relief from the 25-foot streamside zone, is not justified in the record, is the staff recommendation. So petitioner and staff agree that the record shows a necessity for relief from the first 2 zones. There's a little bit of a difference of opinion about temporary relief in the streamside zone. So criterion findings, staff's proposed finding for the first criterion that the approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Proposed finding is that relief from the intermediate zone and fringe zone riparian buffers on the north side of the stream will not be injurious. However, temporary or permanent relief from the streamside zone riparian buffer will significantly impair the natural absorption and drainage management capacity of the stream, increase erosion, and reduce habitat and connectivity corridors for wildlife in the urban environment. The second criterion, that the use and value of the area adjacent to the property will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Our proposed finding is that relief from the intermediate zone and fringe zone, again, to the north side of the stream will not substantially affect adjacent properties. As part of the finding, other existing houses on the south side of Maxwell Lane are also within 75 feet of the stream. However, temporary or permanent relief from the stream side zone riparian buffer would exacerbate known drainage problems for adjacent properties downstream. Going to the third criterion, that the strict application of the UDO will result in practical difficulties, that the practical difficulties are peculiar to the property, and that the development standards variance would relieve the practical difficulties. Recommended proposed finding is that practical difficulties found in the limited buildable area available on the lot outside of all riparian buffers. And the location of the stream near the middle of the lot, it's a peculiar feature that maximizes how much of the lot is covered by the riparian buffers compared to an otherwise similar lot that might have a stream closer to a lot boundary. Relief from the intermediate zone and fringe zone riparian buffers on the north side is adequate to provide area for a house with the footprint proposed by the petitioners, which is reasonable, and of similar size to other houses in the immediate neighborhood. However, strict application, I can't read it when, strict application of only the streamside zone riparian buffer would provide adequate buildable area and would not result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. So the proposed finding is that relief from the intermediate and fringe zones meets this criteria, but relief from the streamside zone doesn't. That's the proposed finding. So based on that, the department recommends that the board adopt the proposed findings and grant the requested variance with the following conditions. First, that it grants relief from the intermediate zone and fringe zone riparian buffers on the north side of the stream, but that all requirements of the streamside zone are still in place, and the requirements of all the riparian zones on the south side of the stream are still in place. And the second recommended condition is prior to issuance of a certificate of zoning compliance, that the property owner record an easement to cover all of the land within the riparian buffers. Technically, this would be a requirement whether or not this was made a condition, but we felt it would be helpful to make it explicit and very clear about what would have to be covered in the easement. If the variance is granted, they would not have to have an easement for the full 75-foot width north of the stream because the variance would have been granted for that. So this clarifies that it only has to cover, if the variance is granted, would only have to cover the 25 feet north of the stream. If you have any questions once we get into it, I'd be happy to answer some, but that's my staff report for now.
Can we please have the petitioner's representative step to the podium and sign in? Can you?
Petitioners, both of whom are here this evening. I want to start
I have
with,
to swear you in.
Sorry.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you've up to 20 minutes. Thanks.
I want to just start with the conditions first to resolve. Condition number one is not an issue. That's frankly ought to be kind of a given condition on almost every project, I think. But condition number two, the concern on that, and you're not going to get an answer tonight, is it's not an objection to the condition, but the condition of this easement to cover the zones is not clearly defined. And so understanding if it's an easement that's intended probably in the form of conservation easement, I would think, or conservancy easement, that's intended to specifically delineate the buffer zone conditions, restrictions, requirements, and that gets put in the public records as a recordable document. It shows up in the chain of title on future deeds and future buyers, so that everybody's on notice about the intermittent stream repairing buffer rules. That's fine, because that's not adding anything. But that easement's yet to be written. There's a little bit of banter, I'll say, a little bit with the staff already is who's going to write it. Technically, normally, they said, well, we should be writing it. You shouldn't be writing it for us, and that's fine. We need to get that sorted out, exactly what the easement reads. So that's the only problem I have in the condition. We accept the condition, but we got to get the specific terms of the easement agreed to and written out. And I think that will come. I want to go back now, kind of the beginning, and could you go to those 5 pages, in page 1, the first one, please? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, please. All right. I had sent several pages. I want to show them here to talk about those. I will take it through because I realized we have a recommendation for approval to staff. While Gabriel's pulling that up, I want to comment on the 10-foot temporary easement. That actually was my request on behalf of the petitioner that we put that in the statement. Because as you saw the diagram, the footprint of the proposed structure, the location of the streamside buffer and how tight that is to construction, the thought was the 10-foot temporary easement would just be clear that construction activity, it has to go around the structure at some point and stuff about not, you know, if it's going to do it, and that streamside buffer is going to be real close to the structure, was just trying to buy a kind of a 10-foot grace period in there, or grace area, where equipment or people are moving back and forth as part of the construction, that they're going to be a little bit further south than that, and a few feet into that area, they can avoid it. It's going to be difficult. They're going to have to be very careful to avoid it. That was the reason for the 10-foot temporary easement, was to try to relieve some of that concern about, gee, are we 2 feet too far to the south? We're going to have to mark that line very carefully to make sure they stay out of the streamside buffer. 10-foot temporary easement during the period of construction would make that a whole lot easier. That's the only reason that's in there. So go back to, did you find those? Okay. You know, look at this one. You see the property highlighted there, the yellow square. Notice what's on either side of it. Fully built structures. The text is covering the bottom of it, but you know, the lots basically to the south, across the other side of the intermittent stream, are all fully developed and developed. You go on to the next one, please. This helps show and you can see the contour lines that are on this, but again, all these lots, all these existing contours are all fully built and developed. Not a one of them dealt with the riparian buffer zones. Now, in part, some of these are old enough that they predate the concept of riparian buffers. Some of them will predate it. The real problem is that they almost all predate, and with the exception of only one that I can think of, but most of them predate the intermittent stream even being on anybody's radar. And we'll see more of that in a moment. But also, I want you to look at the contour lines. Again, the one in the kind of in the middle there of it is petitioner's lot. Look at the contour lines, the elevation contours on either side of it, those lots. Note the blank space. You know what that tells you? The contour lines in there have been obliterated. Those are the building footprints. Those are the building pads for the homes that have been built on either side of this. They built on the same contours that petitioner's proposed building site is having to deal with by variance, because that's the third of the, well, one and two, the second and intermediate, and the third, the buffer zones. What we're trying to deal with there, and the slopes and the feeding into the intermediate stream, were basically obliterated in the construction of the homes on either side. Not because they were thumbing their nose at anybody, but the issue of an intermittent stream or repairing buffer zones was not on anybody's radar. There's communications with staff Gabriel one time when dealing with the petitioners about, well, one of your options is the staff could come out and investigate to see if there's any reconsideration as to whether this is an intermittent stream. Intermittent meaning there's not water in it all the time. It's just, it's a bottom of a small ravine, if you want to think of it that way. And so it's not clearly a repairing feature that's a problem that needs to be worked around. And when you look at a fully built out neighborhood, both sides and the entire property south of it, every one of those properties are within the same buffer zones now, but all were built, there's nothing there would cause the petitioner to think there's a problem with this lot, because everybody's built around it on exactly the same conditions. Would you go to the next one, please? This is just a little bit of an update on those. Gabe, I don't think those are the 5 I sent over. Do you have? Okay, this is the their site plan, that proposed site plan was in the staff packet. They've continued to work with Matt Ellerwood to revise it, to refine it, to better deal with slope issues in the zone. So this just, that has been a work in progress to try to keep getting it better, and this was just the most recent iteration of that. Next one, please. There should have been 5 numbered pages. That's not it, I don't know. There are a couple photographs. Go on. Yeah, all right. All right. You know, sorry, don't want to belabor this. We had sent a couple photographs. I hope we'll be able to show that one of the issues that is talked about in the staff report about enforcement action things had to do with tree cutting, and you've seen photographs in the staff report of that. That's the north side of the intermittent stream. This lot, the property actually extends to the south of the intermittent stream a good ways, and there's a lot of trees over there that were not touched. Why is that important? It's important only if you're looking at trying to calculate the percentage of canopy that's been removed, because it's doubtful that it's been 50%. But that's not really the issue. It's not the tree canopy. It's working now in the buffer zone of the intermittent stream. And I have to tell you, that came as kind of a out of the blue, hey, did you know there's an intermittent stream there and there are these rules? And that had never surfaced. One of the pages I meant to have to show you was an exchange of emails with the petitioner and Keegan. And it's not an attack on Keegan. In fact, he was very responsive. But it was the petitioners in writing to email. They hadn't purchased the lot, asking about the property, what the zoning is, what could be done. Are there any spatial things we ought to be aware of about this property? Keegan was very responsive, but in his response, there was no discussion of repairing zones, no discussion of minimum stream, no discussion of development restrictions because of those features. It just wasn't on anybody's radar. So they buy the lot, they cut the trees, looking ahead to getting ready for the building site, and in the process, when this comes to staff's attention, finally somebody's looking and said, hey, do you know there's an imminent stream down there and you can't be doing that. That's how we got to where we are. Not that they went out and thumbed the nose at anybody and said, we're going to just do this anyway and see if we can get away with it. They were acting, they thought, in perfect accordance with what was allowed, in part because they inquired specifically with Keegan in advance, and he answered as best he could. This just wasn't part of the answer. And so they're stuck with it. Now they've got a lot they own. It's the only one in the entire neighborhood that's not been built upon. And the only way they're going to be able to build upon it now, having bought the lot, is with the variances. There's just no way around it. The building footprint on the one of those, I think it was obvious. The front of the building is set back from Maxwell, consistent with the buildings in the neighborhood. So it's in the right location. The footprint of the building for a reasonable home to be built on that lot. You saw that on the one that is outside the stream side buffer zone, but it clearly encompasses both of the other two buffer zones. And a variance to be able to allow the construction of that single-family home on a single-family lot that's been in existence for a very long time, and actually has been in existence before we had repairing buffer zones at all, and would ask that you approve the variance and allow them to continue on with their construction then. Sorry. That's it. Questions? And certainly, if depending on the question, may have to bring petitioner up to answer. But.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Okay, so we are to the board for questions of the petitioner and of staff.
My question is for staff regarding the easement specifications. Can you specify exactly what the easement is supposed to be and who's going to write the easement, how it's going to be recorded?
So the content of the easement is reiterating the standards that are in the UDO. So in the UDO, first of all, it defines what the zones are, so many feet distance from the center of the stream, and then it defines, generally land disturbing activities are not allowed in there, but it defines exceptions for certain land disturbing activities that are allowed. So the easement would record those same restrictions and that are already in the UDO and put them in easement so that it would be connected with the property and show up in anyone's title search and so on. So the purpose of it would be to reiterate what's in the UDO. For who drafts it, the typical process that I would expect would be followed here is that we have easement language. We speaking generally as the city, would draft it, and then, of course, it has to be recorded by the petitioner, so they might want to look at it, and if they have a question about something, they can, ask a question about it. But generally, that the city would draft it. The only thing that's at all slightly different about this is that we haven't had similar properties in recent times that have had this restriction alone on it. So other properties that were larger redevelopments that may have had riparian buffers, there were other things going on, and so they were recorded as conservancy easements, slightly different language. So we don't. Up to now, we don't have a template for a riparian buffer easement. There is a proposal that went with the latest batch of UDO updates to the Plan Commission earlier this month and received their endorsement to add into code what exactly a riparian buffer easement would be. It closely follows the parts of code that talk about what a conservancy easement is, but adds in the specific citation to UDO 20.04.050F for the riparian buffers. So in other words, the easement language just calls out the UDO standards, which means, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, here, which means that if the UDO standards ever changed, automatically the easement standards would change.
Yes, that's correct. So, as Gabriel mentioned, just to summarize, we do have language right now to propose a riparian buffer easement. It's in the series of UDO amendments the Planning Commission just recently approved and are on its way to City Council, so we are working on that. So we have the easement language already drafted for what that would be.
So I have a question, Gabriel. So what constitutes an intermittent stream? Is everything subject to, how does this get assessed and determined?
There is a UDO definition of stream. Let's see if I can cite it for you here.
Real quick, while he's looking that up, the definition basically says, any intermittent or perennial stream, but also, we've extended that to anything with a defined stream bed, is something that is subject to the riparian buffer standards. But that's not something that is necessarily part of this petition tonight. They did not file an appeal of our interpretation of what is the intermittent stream and would be subject to that. So we are only here tonight to discuss relief from that standard.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful to point out. So their staff's determination is that there is an intermittent stream. The petitioners have an opportunity to appeal. It's a determination. There's an opportunity to appeal that. They have not appealed it. So you're looking at a record that says there is a stream here, and no one is contesting that. I think it's also part of the record, the character of the stream, right? So there's a difference between the White River and a small stream in someone's backyard. If the White River were in Bloomington, the same riparian buffer standards would apply. So that gets to thinking about, well, maybe some relief might be necessary. But.
So the smallest intermittent stream, it's not a. It's either the riparian buffers apply or they don't apply, right?
For the strict UDO, that's
yes,
exactly correct.
That's the way it is.
Yes.
Okay. And then, I'm sorry, do you want to, go ahead.
Well, my question regarding the easement, so what is the purpose of the easement? Is this for future, it has the area conserved, so if they decide to sell the property, the next property owner will know about it? Because obviously the other owners in the street don't have easements over this, so it's an easement with no end.
The purpose of the easement is it gets recorded with the deed, so future owners of this property would be made aware of it when they purchase it, that there is an easement. It does call out that there's this area of protection along a portion of the property. It's not something that is passed out to all of the neighbors along there so that everybody else knows, but it does go forward with this property so the future owners know.
So I had a question about the request for temporary relief. We really don't have the ability to grant anything temporarily. It's a variance. It runs in perpetuity with the property. Is there another mechanism that the petitioners could look to that could be helpful to them?
No, not really. As you just mentioned, there are no such things as permanent or temporary variances. It either is or is not permanently granted relief. So in this case here, it would just be a variance in perpetuity if it were granted for relief from that 25-foot zone.
Okay.
But as Gabriel mentioned during his presentation, there is room to move the house forward. So if there are concerns about the buildability of the design of what they've got shown, they can move it forward, and they've got more room from that riparian buffer in order to construct it.
Okay, so they're not up against the front setback line?
No, there's additional room. They could move it north toward the street.
Of how much they have?
If you look in your packet, let me see what page number it actually is.
Page 17 in the packet has the exhibit.
They can move it forward. They can't go into the right-of-way, can they? Staff.
Sorry, can you say that again, please?
They only have, they have 15 feet they can move forward, correct? From the current 15-foot setback from the right-of-way, they could, you're saying that they can move forward, Eric was saying they can move forward 15 feet?
This is approximate, just based off of
Understood.
looking, but approximately appeared to be 19 feet, would still be compliant with the UDO.
Oh, that's, okay, I see the dotted line would be 19. Okay.
So the setback is 15 feet from the property line. It looks like on their information, they're showing the property line as the center of the street. However, in reality, that would really be from the edge of the pavement. You know, we would have a prescriptive right-of-way, you know, over the edge of the pavement.
Got it right, so, thank you. Well, I mean, I guess a question to the petitioner is that even something they want to consider moving it forward?
Again, Mike Harmon for petitioner. I want to be clear, we're not objecting to the easement. I understand the purpose for doing that, and knowledge is important, and people don't necessarily investigate properties and discover everything. Even when you try to investigate, you don't discover everything that you need sometimes, and that's kind of a little bit what happened here too. I just want to ensure that, well, they're talking about you had a chance to appeal, you didn't do that. It's 15 days from that time that first decision was made. Hey, that's an intermittent stream, so that goes back into 23 ways. Anyway, it is possible that that the city on its own would further investigate this and determine it's not an intermittent stream. This year, 10 years from now, things can change. I just don't want the easement written that it independently opposes these rules as an easement as opposed to implementing the riparian buffer rules, whatever they are. Because if it should ever be determined this is not an intermittent stream, those disappear as to this property. That's all.
My question, that can be addressed in
Yeah,
your follow-up,
yeah,
but
right,
my question is, would they be willing to consider moving it forward? Is that just a no for the?
It's a no, but
Okay,
primary reason.
that was all I needed. But we can go over the rest of the stuff
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
get to the.
The only other comment I wanted to make then was actually more on point of your question. It's, well, the one photograph, we don't need to go back through, but one of the planning principles always in locating your footprint is to be compatible, trying to match the setback of other structures on the same block face. And if you saw the properties.
Right,
the
I understand, and that's why I
Yeah,
asked.
yes.
So that answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Hood. I do. Great. My name is Mark Hood. I live at 2420 East Maxwell Lane, so about 4 doors to the east of this lot. And I'm here to respectfully request that the BZA delay or deny this petition for the following reasons. In the packet, the petitioner's statement as presented in the letter from their attorney differs substantially from the summary at the beginning of the staff report. The proposed findings and recommendations in the staff report don't really correspond to what the petitioners are asking for. According to their attorney's letter, the petitioners are requesting only a temporary variance to operate construction equipment within the streamside buffer during the construction, and then after that, somehow the variance is to expire. And the staff report is different than all of that. So maybe we can infer from the drawings that were attached to the letter that they're requesting variances within the riparian other buffers, the intermediate and the fringe zones, but it's not stated in the petitioner's statement. So there's a pretty big disconnect there. And I think that makes it very difficult for public comment, that it's very difficult for members of the public and neighbors to read the packet and understand what's being asked for and why it's being asked for and what the implications are. My other concern is that at least one of my neighbors who would be one of the neighbors that should have been notified through the abutments process by the rules of the BZA petitions has not received a letter. So I have questions about whether the neighbors were properly notified according to the BZA rules. So I think that between that and what I've heard tonight about the requirement for an easement when there is no easement agreement drafted makes it very difficult for the neighbors to have a supportive opinion. We've all built our homes on that beautiful street, and we're in favor of them being able to build a home on their beautiful lot. But I don't think the procedure is in place here, so I would recommend at least delaying this until the petitioner's statement and the staff report are in agreement as to what is being proposed.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here this evening who would like to speak to this petition? Is there anybody online, Eric?
No, I do not see. If there's anybody online that would like to make comment, please use the raise hand function or send me a message in chat. It looks like Gwen White. So there we go.
There is someone?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Gwen White. I am a.
Thank you. I have to swear you
I'm
in.
hearing an echo.
Excuse me, I have to swear you in for a moment first before you speak. Okay? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You have up to 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I am a neighbor of Mark Hood's. I live on the same side of Maxwell Lane and have lived here 10 years. And I agree with what Mark has said about understanding what it is.
Recording in progress.
That is being requested. In addition, the comments about the houses already here that, they're fully developed, but we're not asking to build, or one of the things I'm objecting to is that the new property wants to be built, or they want it to be built within 25 feet of the riparian stream. And today I went out and measured the distance from the back of my house to that stream. It is 60 feet. So I guess one of the things I'm objecting to is the characterization that all the other houses on this street are, right up to that 25 feet when they are not. So, I really have concerns about, going closer, to that 25 feet. Why does that need to be? So all the other houses are not that close. They're to that stream. So I think the idea of not building it that far down the lot, I have those objections. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody further? Okay, if there's no one here, then we're back to the board for further questions and action.
I want to follow up to that with the staff. I'm looking at page 16. If we could look at that, I want to try to understand what the public comment is trying to point out. Can we see that?
Yeah, let's see if I can.
Okay. And while you're doing that, I mean, the question I have is I'm looking at this image that was provided in it, and the back of that house looks like it's pretty much in line with the other two on both sides. So I'm not sure where the house of the person from the public who just spoke is, but it looks like the two on each side. And I was just trying to get some sense from the the city, would you concur that the back of that house is pretty much in line with the back of the other two? I mean, not exactly, but close. Yeah, especially to the right, but I know the one on the left, it's pretty much, it looks like it's exactly the same as, in terms of the building structure, not the porch, and then there's a portion of it that sticks out. But what's the city's opinion of that? Is it roughly in line with the other?
The city staff has not done an in-depth analysis of the setback from other houses, but based on the limited analysis that we have done, we're not aware of any other houses that are closer than 25 feet to the stream, but it appears that all of them on the block are closer than 75 feet.
Sorry. Hi, I'll just repeat that. I just want to confirm that everything was done properly.
The notice does go out based on a property owner list
that was provided.
The mailing system is not a certified mail system. It's this regular mail system with an affidavit of due mailing. That was my responsibility. We did the mailings, and I can tell you they went to the addresses that were on that list. Okay. But there's no green card to sign or anything that comes back to show proof of receipt. So
that's all. I just want to make sure you fulfilled your obligation. That's all. Thank you.
It appears based on the address that Mr. Hood said at 2420, it would be outside of the public notification zone. So the zoning code requires 2 properties deep within 300 foot. And it looks like he is at about the 4 property deep. So he would have been outside the range that would be required to receive a letter.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, I'm ready for a motion. Oh, is the
petitioner have any time left?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think you do have some time left. If there's anything further you'd like to say?
This would be the time to deal
This
with
is
the
it.
easement issue. That,
Well, we're going to be fine on the easement. It's getting fleshed out. Even the city's concept of what the easement's going to be is being fleshed out now. It's not a done deal. And Eric's explanation for what it would do covers my concerns on what's coming. It's not something new. It's trying to publicly document in a recordable document what these restrictions and rules are pertaining to buffer zones. And all we're saying is comply with the ordinance, and that's fine. And the other comment, actually, Mr. Throckmorton's questions about the setbacks and the relative positions, really, with the last comments I wanted to make, it's a reasonable location for the footprint. Well, there's one of them beyond that, but judging both from setback from the street as to where property on your side, as you look at that one, actually, it's about the 4th page of the staff report. It showed up. It's kind of a bigger picture view. It was kind of yellow with all the lots and structures in it, if you find that. But it really shows that houses lined both sides are on all sorts of configurations, some narrow and longer and deeper, others not. But at least on the north side, all the lots, no, it's on yours is about the kind of the yellow page of the plat map with it's the 3rd or 4th page of the packet. Well, I don't want to later. But anyway, it helps demonstrate when you see all those buildings lined up on that there we go, right there. You can see petitioner's lot, and position kind of relative, the setback from Maxwell is consistent with the positioning of the footprint, depending on the size, the structure, the length. You can see on the south side, the differences you get and how close it gets down to the property line or whatever is based on the configuration of the building. So a little less consistency on setback from the block face on that, but certainly on the north side, on these northern lots on the south side of Maxwell, the structures are relatively lined up in terms of setback from the road. And so we're trying to maintain that. The questions were asked about didn't ask for the variances. The first line in the easement is relief from the buffer zones, plural, in the ordinance section specified. I mean, that's all the buffer zones. It goes into some detail that as to the third buffer zone, the seat shrine one, a temporary one. And the specific is to, in this zone, the request is only a temporary buffer, and that we've talked about, I won't belabor that, but the letter clearly says the zones per the code, but limited on the third one, only the 10-foot issue. So I don't believe that the petitioner's letter misled anybody, or they would have been misled by it. Thank you.
And on that point, I'll just add that the notice that was sent would clearly call out that the request is a variance, so it's clear to whomever would receive that in the public. Okay, so we're ready for action.
I'll go ahead and make a motion, and I'll state ahead of time that I will accept all thoughts on amendments to this, but I'll start off with a recommendation to approve the variance V-02-24 with the following conditions of, number one, this variance grants relief from the requirements of the intermediate zone and fringe zone riparian buffers on the north side of the stream. Property remains subject to all requirements related to the 25-foot streamside zone riparian buffer on both sides of the stream, as well as the requirements of all riparian buffer zones on the south side of the stream. And number two, prior to issuance of certificate of zoning compliance for any building construction on the property owner shall record an easement in a form approved by the Planning and Transportation Department and in accordance with UDO section 20.04.03, subsection F, subsection 3, that covers all land on the lot within 25 feet north of the stream and within 75 feet south of the stream.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So is it possible for us to amend it to give them the temporary 10-foot relief?
I will accept. I'm open to all amendments.
I don't think we have that purview.
Or do we have that, the ability to amend to give them the temporary 10 feet that they need during?
So you can certainly add any conditions of approval. But as we mentioned, there's not a permanent or temporary relief mechanism. So if you want to approve a different relief through a condition of approval, then you can do that, but it would be a permanent, not a temporary.
Do we have legal?
Yeah, Heather Lacey is online and can certainly add anything if she is.
Ms. Lacey?
I'm here. Sorry, it's taken me a minute to get unmuted. I think Eric is correct that you're not able to grant them access of that 10 feet on a temporary basis. So,
As a condition of approval, we can't do that.
I don't think so. I think that I don't see in my very fast research while you all were speaking about this, the option to do that on a temporary basis. I think if you want to give me a couple more minutes to look and confirm that I'm correct on the law about that, I'm happy to do a little bit more research. But I think even as a condition of approval, conditions of approval aren't usually done on a temporary basis. The condition is permanent.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just kind of add that, the variance criteria are based on something unique about a property. There's not a temporary peculiarity about a property. It's either there permanently or it's not. So that's why, there's not really such a thing as a temporary variance because, your criteria that you're basing it on are a permanent nature.
We know that this poses some challenges from a constructability point of view, so we can totally appreciate that, but I don't think we really have the mechanism to provide you relief from that. Okay, so I don't, unless you want to, unless we want to pause it, you would have to withdraw your motion because we would.
You want to pause it for her to research, for, like, give her 3 to 5 minutes?
Yeah, I think so, because I think that to me is a very practical way.
We'll have to reread the.
Yeah, no, you don't. You can just say
But-
condition
So
one,
I'm
condition
okay
two.
if we could take a 5-minute pause while she checks? Is that what you're asking for?
The word temporary, though. What's being hung up here is the word temporary. Can they have a permission to go over the riparian buffer during construction?
Right, because that's. to
That's
me, the
all they need.
logical- If we approve it, then the logical thing is giving them the additional space needed for construction without being in violation. And I think that, yeah, permission.
I hear and understand, I guess, what you're looking at and requesting. You know, staff's position has been, you know, that we are supportive of the variance from the two outermost because it does present a peculiar condition on the property in terms of development, but that the inner 25-foot most zone does not present that same difficulty. You know, they are able to get a building on there. They can build the size building that they want if they want to move it forward to minimize, you know, concerns about disturbance. Also, they don't have to build a building of this size. You know, there's not a minimum lot or minimum size for a house. You know, they could change the configuration of it. They could move it forward. You know, the basic criteria is that without the granting of the variance, a lot is unbuildable. You know, and we've presented that the first two zones do present that difficulty, but the third zone, the inner zone, does not present that difficulty with the development of the lot.
What I'm saying is I'm okay to withdraw the petition for, you know, the motion just for a few minutes until we have a chance to have it checked by legal. If that's what you want, I'm completely fine with that. I'll withdraw.
But I want to understand, if I could, the idea of the buffer zone is to protects what's there. So the idea that there would be construction in the area, is that anathema to the protection of the riparian buffer that the buffer offers?
Correct, yes. Yes, so the purpose of the riparian buffer is to leave that area undisturbed, to protect the existing vegetation, to minimize, you know, any runoff, to help.
With construction.
Yes.
So
It sounds like what we're asking for is the ability to disturb it, but have it restored is what we're looking for, right?
I would
Tim?
say so. I mean, I think, right, the restoration being a part of it, but the logical part saying, if we grant the variance, and it looks like maybe a foot there before they go into the riparian buffer, where they're
It's gonna be
gonna
difficult to-
subject to potential violation, I would assume. Is that correct? I guess that's for staff. If they go into it, if they don't allow the 10 feet and they go into it as construction happens because they really don't know where that line is going to be, does that then present further issue for them?
Yes, so that would be an enforcement issue on our part. If they have encroached within that 25-foot buffer or removed anything or constructed anything, yes.
Yes, I would.
Yes.
I withdraw the question.
okay, so do we want to ask Ms. Lacey to provide some more input?
I mean, if it's only a few minutes worth of people's time, I think it's worth it because that's going to give them
Okay.
a little bit.
I believe Ms. Lacey is ready.
She's ready in the 5 minutes we've been speaking. Okay.
I think what I'm struck by is that the riparian buffer is there for the purpose of protecting the ground and that stream. And allowing a temporary variance may damage what you're trying to protect. As far as whether you could have as a condition that provides an end date for when the condition expires, you may be able to do that. And I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer for you than that. It looks like in the law, if it's determined that granting the temporary variance is not going to cause significant imminent environmental harm to the land, air, or water resources, it could be granted.
With a sunset date.
Yes.
Board, the proposed findings are pretty clear that any temporary, even temporary infringement into the streamside zone would be injurious to the community, would substantially adversely affect neighboring properties, and would not be justified by peculiarities of the property. So if you were interested, if you can do such a condition to allow a temporary status, if you were interested in doing that, you would need to, I would believe you would need to at least amend those findings, because the findings are pretty clear that infringing into the streamside zone, even on a temporary basis, would not be in the criteria, if that makes sense.
Essentially, the condition number 1 is what it sounds like would have to be revised. Is that what you're saying?
As staff, I would say all 3 pretty clearly say that the streamside zone, any infringement into the streamside zone would make it not meet the criteria.
I have to say, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. I just feel like it's a slippery slope. I think, I think siding the outside of that house may be a bit of a challenge. But I know a lot of the foundation work, the heavy work, can really proceed from the north, by and large. I just know the nature of construction. It kind of spreads, and it's hard once if heavy equipment's driven back there. You're sinking down. It can be very, very destructive. And I feel like the riparian buffer is 75 feet long, and we're providing relief from 50 feet. And I don't think it's insurmountable. It is definitely, it's going to take more effort on the part of your contractor, and they're going to have to be very conscientious. But I feel like this is a slippery slope. I just do.
So your recommendation is to keep
I would keep the motion as is.
With the assumption that they would be able to move the house forward, given that
They could. Yes, they have.
19
There's
feet of
a
span.
little bit of wiggle room.
to work with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you have 3 feet to work with the ladder off the ground, you can side the back side of the house.
Okay.
It's not ideal. It's not ideal, but I think this is just a little unorthodox. Yeah.
I agree with you.
Okay. Okay, so the motion's back.
Well, the motion has not been.
It's not been withdrawn. So are we ready for any further discussion? Is there anything further?
I can call the question if you'd like.
Please.
Well, I call the question.
Okay, so we are voting to move approval of this variance.
Clapper,
Yes.
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell.
Yes.
Okay, the variance is granted. Good luck. Yay. Thanks so much. Okay. We are now ready for V-03-24, that is Bryan Rental, Inc.
Is this the one that was continued?
I'm Katie Gandhi, zoning planner.
I'm going to begin with the staff report, and then the petitioner. So first the staff report, and then the petitioner. Thank you.
Katie Gandhi, zoning planner. This variance petition is for the property located at 430 East Kirkwood in central downtown. This property is located in the downtown character overlay in the MDUV district, mixed-use downtown zoning with University Village character overlay. All properties immediately adjacent to 430 East Kirkwood Avenue are also in the MDUV district. And this property is in Kirkwood corridor, which extends from Washington Street to Indiana Avenue, which is relevant because architectural standards do have certain designations for both the MDUV district and Kirkwood corridor. 430 East Kirkwood is 0.31 acres, has frontage along Kirkwood Avenue to the north and frontage along South Dunn Street to the east. Its current use is multi-tenant commercial. The comprehensive plan's future land use map designation of this site is downtown, which is a land use characterized by compact, urban, high-density, mixed-use developments. Here are a few photos of the property. This is from the northeast. And this is a view from the east. The upstairs pub, one of the tenants located at 430 East Kirkwood, is proposing a remodel of the second floor of the northwest portion of the building. The remodel includes raising the roof of the northwest section of the building and installing new windows and doors, new wood siding to match the existing wood siding on the first floor and elsewhere on the second floor of the building, and a new Juliet balcony. The proposed remodel also includes an extension of the 2-hour concrete block parapet wall, rerouting utilities, and installing a new 90-minute exit door and stairs along the west facade of the building. This is an interior elevation of the proposed second floor, where the roof will be raised. So the UDO states that minor repairs and maintenance of non-conforming structures are permitted and encouraged, provided that they do not increase the degree of nonconformity and that they conform to the building code and other applicable regulations in the UDO. The proposed renovation increases the degree of nonconformity because it's an expansion of a wall area using non-conforming material, and because it proposes installing new materials that don't conform to current UDO standards. The UDO also states that if a renovation is proposed for only a portion of a building, the Planning and Transportation Director may waive compliance with site and building design standards if meeting the current UDO would cause the renovation to be inconsistent with the overall design of the existing structure. The director has not waived compliance with site and building design standards for this proposal, as a compatible design could be used. So this proposal includes 2 variances. Both are from the downtown character overlay district facade material standards. The first being that wood is prohibited as a primary exterior facade material for all street and non-street facing facades. In this zoning district, wood may be used as secondary facade material as long as it fits within a certain percentage, as defined by the definition of secondary exterior finish material. The petitioner proposes removing existing wood siding on the second floor, increasing the surface area of the second floor facade, and installing new wood siding on the existing and new portions of the second floor. The existing and new wood exterior finish material would cover more than 20% of the building facade, so it would be primary exterior facade material. The second variance is also from the facade material standards. Cement block, similarly, is a prohibited exterior facade material, may be used as a secondary facade material on floors above the first floor. The petitioner, like the wood, proposes using it to increase the, to help with, in alignment with the increase of the roof height, and because the existing and new concrete block exterior finish material would together constitute more than 20% of the building facade. In assessing the variance criteria, the granting of this variance of both variance 1 and 2 would not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, or welfare of the community. Variance criteria 2 findings include that the use and value of the area adjacent to the property would not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. The majority of surrounding properties on Kirkwood are built with metal, stone, or brick, which are all permitted facade materials by the current UDO. But maintaining a wood exterior facade material would not alter the use, value, or foot traffic of visitors to this street and its surrounding properties. This proposal is in line with the City of Bloomington's downtown's vision and infill strategy plan, which says that downtown Bloomington conveys a sense of time and place, which is expressed through numerous historic and traditional buildings, and that unique and cherished character should be respected. The wood siding does bring diversity to the downtown architecture and connects downtown Bloomington to its history. Variance 3 findings include that the strict application of the UDO for variances 1 and 2 would not result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. The property will still be usable as a commercial multi-tenant center if these variances are not approved. Though the wood siding for the remodel matches existing materials, there are approved materials that could mimic the appearance of wood or blend well with existing wood. While the strict application of the UDO will not impact the use, the request to utilize materials cohesive with existing materials on the building is reasonable and would be awkward to require new extended cement block portion to be covered by an improved facade material while allowing existing cement block to remain exposed, lawfully nonconforming. Based on this assessment of the variance criteria and the findings just described, the department recommends adopting the staff report findings and denying the requested variances.
Thank you. We are now ready for the petitioner's report or presentation. If you could please sign in first. You did already. Can you state your name?
Michael Chambly.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have up to 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Michael Chambly, and I'm a local architect. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my background and some of the projects that I've done in Bloomington. My family, well, I graduated first from Texas Tech University, and my family and I moved to Bloomington from Texas. After working for 3 architectural firms, I started my own architectural practice in 2000. So a few of the projects that I've done at the Bloomington area include the Shops on College Ball Road, Copper Tree Residential Development, Scholars Quad Apartments at 10th and the Bypass, Ken Nunn's Law Office on I-69, the 2 white buildings on South College Mall Road by Kroger, a new main entry addition to Sherwood Oaks Christian Church, the interior remodel of the Monroe County Health Department, an addition to Smithfield Communications corporate headquarters, most of the buildings in Landmark Business Park, and a multiple number of remodels at the upstairs pub. So the upstairs pub is planning a remodel of the northwest wing of the 2nd floor of Dunkirk Square. The proposed work includes raising the roof on part of the northwest side of the building, which will include the north elevation facing Kirkwood Avenue. The roof is being raised in order to install a large original IU scoreboard that has been used in Assembly Hall during IU's NCAA basketball championships under Coach Bobby Knight. Our goal is to restore this scoreboard so it can be utilized to keep real-time scores during IU sporting events. And that's a rendering that we had done of the interior, showing the scoreboard. And that's the whole reason we're raising the roof, is to have room for it, because it's 7 feet high and 17 feet long. Dunkirk Square was built in 1972, has a visible facade comprised of limestone, white stucco, mainly wood siding, and concrete block. More than half of the building utilizes wood siding and has been such wood siding for more than 52 years. As part of the remodel and in keeping with the 1970s architecture, we propose to use matching wood siding on the exterior upper walls and to replace a portion of the existing 2nd floor wood siding with new siding installed at an angle to match the roof slope. So what we're talking about here is raising this roof and using wood siding at an angle to kind of match the roof. To be clear, there is currently wood siding on the walls, and the proposal is to install wood siding when the same walls are made taller. In addition, the west wall, which isn't very visible due to its close proximity to the Rubicon building located immediately west, is comprised of painted concrete block, which we'd like to extend with the same concrete block. Did y'all have any questions so far? Okay. The current UDO does not allow wood siding on exterior walls in the MD-UV Kirkwood corridor. Metal siding or limestone on the 2nd level is permitted, although the building would appear very awkward and otherwise harm the ambiance of Kirkwood Avenue if those materials were used on the 2nd floor, therefore contrasting against the 1st floor original wood siding. So that's our biggest concern, is that we can use metal siding that looks like wood, but it really won't match the wood. So we're prepared to put wood siding the elevation on the east side. That's where it's raised as well, but we prefer to use wood. In addition, we are seeking a variance regarding the concrete block 2-hour fire-rated wall. We're proposing to raise this concrete block wall 10 feet, utilizing the same concrete block materials, and then repaint. It's worth noting that there is only a 4.5-foot space between the buildings to the west. and the neighboring Rubicon Building east wall, which is barely visible from the street. It doesn't seem logical to prohibit a mere extension of an already fire-rated concrete block wall with a different material. In short, it would look peculiar introducing a new material above the existing concrete block wall. The variances requested will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community. Neither of the proposed materials would create any harm to the adjacent properties whatsoever. Given the large size of the nature of the building and street frontage, it is not practical to obligate the petitioner to introduce different facade materials. We encourage the BZA to waive compliance with building design standards for the proposed upstairs pub renovation, as strict application would require the building to be inconsistent with the overall design and aesthetics of the existing structure. So do y'all have any questions now? Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, we'll let you know.
Okay.
Go back to the board for questions of the petitioner and staff.
Any question for staff, please? So my question is did it trigger this just because it's 20% of the, is the material 20% of the facade? Is that why it triggered? Because is wood prohibited or?
Yes, wood and cement block and cementitious siding are all prohibited exterior facade materials in this zoning district.
Is this a historic building?
No.
No. Okay, I was just trying to figure out, because in a historic building, you have to match the existing exterior. Okay, thank you.
Questions? Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we will go, if the petitioner, you'll have an opportunity after public comment to speak again. Use any unused time. So is there anybody here from the public who would like to speak to this petition? Mm-hmm. Please. If you could sign in.
Thank you. My name is Greg Rago. I'm the owner of and operator of Nick's English Hut, 423 East Kirkwood, across the street from the project here.
I have to swear you in.
Pardon me?
I have to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I can't hear really well. If you're swearing me in, I say yes. Is that what
Okay,
you're doing?
that's what I said. Okay.
Sorry.
So you have 5 minutes.
Okay, like 5 minutes. So yeah, I support the project as far as what Dave Kamen and the tenants and the architect have proposed. I think, I know him on a personal level, and I know him as a business person. He's a great neighbor. He always puts the neighborhood and his neighbors first. He always makes sure that everybody around him is aware of what's going on in what his projects. And I think his probably track record speaks for himself and what he's done around town development-wise and with Dunkirk Square. It seems to me that the wood siding, which is what they would like to do, kind of goes along with the rest of the profile. I think it looks great because of various ordinances over the years. I guess things have changed. But I'm in support of the proposal as they put it. I'm sure they'll come to a compromise if need be. But overall, I think it's aesthetically pleasing for Kirkwood, for the patrons, not only that come down on a regular basis, but also for visitors to our community that will come down and see what we have down at Kirkwood. I think it's great what they're doing, putting their money into a project. that will spur a lot of local jobs and keep a lot of our local people employed. And he's always taken care of his property at Dunkirk Square. I've never had a problem looking at it, or being in it, or being social with the people there. It's one of the things I think that kind of keeps Bloomington unique, and have an owner-operator as myself or Dave or Steve, who has the upstairs pub, to be able to develop the property as they see fit within confines of what the city of Bloomington wants. We understand what the city of Bloomington wants, but I think that maybe if we could bend a little bit, we could probably come to a compromise on this. But I'm all for the way that they have the wood siding arranged, and I think it'd be good for it. It's a much better, it's much more aesthetically pleasing and economically viable, I think. So in the long run, I'm just in total support of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you could please state your name.
My name is Brian Isaacs. I'm the operating manager for Jimmy John's in Bloomington.
Okay, if you could, I just need to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have up to 5 minutes.
Okay. When I moved to Bloomington 20 years ago, Dunkirk Square was a place that quickly became an area where my friends and I like to hang out all the time, watch games, come down and have drinks, go to concerts, just have a good time. And I didn't even realize how important at the time that building was. And then I moved to South Carolina in 2015, was gone for about 6 years, and I came back to Bloomington to pursue my career here, working for Antoine. And when I first got into town, I saw a lot of really new fancy buildings, and as a business person, I was really excited for the growth. But as a Hoosier, I was a little bit nervous that my favorite city had lost some of its small town charm. And then I went down to Dunkirk Square and saw that that was still intact. So really, in conclusion, I think that it would be detrimental to the businesses there that kind of thrive off that nostalgic look of Dunkirk Square. And I think for the city, it just does not look good overall, like the proposed material that they have used for that. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak to this petition? Is there anybody online?
Yes, there is one person online.
Okay.
Erica, you should be able to unmute.
If you could state your name. Okay. If you could state your name, please.
Yeah, hi, my name is Erica Yi. I'm from the Yatagarasu Ramen Restaurant and Dunkirk Square.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, we opened our store in March of 2022, and the reason we wanted to be at Dunkirk Square because they have great location near the campus and close to the downtown, and along with also the look of the building. The building has a lot of great characteristics that make our space great for a ramen restaurant, including when you enter to the entrance, it's very dark wood. We have and match all the style we want. We believe that upstairs pub should be granted their variance as the building material they like to use match the building, and any other building material would look bad for them and for us. And thank you for your time. And I think we're looking forward to seeing upstairs pub be a big remodel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if it's possible to turn the closed caption back on because it has been a little hard to hear people a bit, just in the future. Okay, is there anyone else?
Yes, so Susan Locos is next.
Okay, great. If you could please state your name when you're ready.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. It's Susan Wilkos.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely, I do.
Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. So my husband, Steve, and I are the business owners and operators of Rita's Italian Ice in Bloomington. So I just want to start off by saying when we first began looking for a location for a business in Bloomington, we looked at many things, but the main two factors were number one, high traffic, so we can sell a lot of ice and custard. Number two, a place of community where we'd serve college students, locals, alumni, and everyone in between. Dunkirk Square felt like a place of community since the first time my family and I stepped foot on Kirkwood. Yes, the building is a bit quirky, it's older. There have been many businesses that have called Dunkirk Square home over the decades. But based on historical photos of the building showcased upstairs at the upstairs pub, Dunkirk Square's exterior has essentially stayed the same. Seriously, just go upstairs to the upstairs pub and look around their walls. It's like a historic mecca for Dunkirk Square. It would truly be a shame for upstairs pub to deviate from the original appearance of Dunkirk Square. Just because new coding is forward thinking, why don't we try to work with existing buildings to make them better? These older, nostalgic buildings shape Bloomington to what it is today, and is a large reason why my family and I, excuse me, chose Bloomington as our second Rita's location. I really appreciate your time and hope the BZA will vote in favor of upstairs pub and keeping the nostalgic appearance of Dunkirk Square that we all love. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So that is all that I see. If there is anybody else online that we've missed, please use the raise hand function and we can recognize you. I'm not seeing anybody else.
Okay, then we are back to the petitioner. There is additional time remaining, I'm sure.
Yeah, they have about 13 minutes left.
Okay, so if anybody from the petitioner's team would like to speak to, this is your opportunity. If you could sign in.
Yeah, I already did.
You already did, okay.
Yep.
Just state your name.
Eric Kamen.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to say one thing about the building. These right here, these are apartments. So I think I'm among one of the few people that have eaten, drank, shopped.
Can you speak?
Oh, yeah. So I've eaten, lived, drank, and shopped at Dunkirk Square. So this building is really meaningful to me. So a couple of things. Number one, Robin was ZNC. He was here. He wasn't able to speak. So I'd like to make a statement for him, if that's okay. He says, "Hello, my name is Robin, and my family and I operate the ZNC restaurant at Dunkirk Square. The construction upstairs pub is planning to do above my restaurant is going to be great for me and our neighbors. It'll make their business better, bring more customers to the building, and will be better for my business and the next door businesses as well. I think wood would make the building look good, and other materials will make it look misfit. I hope you'll consider businesses like mine, which will benefit from your approval. Thank you for your time." That was Robin with ZNC. He operates right below this project. So back to me. I'd like to state I really respect city planning, and I think what we really want to do is work with them. And it becomes really, really hard when we work on older buildings. And one thing I did ask city planning was, I said that they have their goals, we have our goals, Upstairs Pub has their goals, and I said, why don't we try to align our goals together? And what I was told was that the UDO is forward thinking. So what does that exactly mean? And the way I interpret it is that enforcing the strict application of the UDO on old buildings is a practical difficulty in itself. The way I see it is that it is easier to construct a giant new apartment building than it is to make improvements to old buildings. Why is it that you can construct a giant apartment building and for us, we get dictated what materials get used on a 50-year-old building? It's very tough, and we keep coming to you, the BZA, asking to make existing buildings better, but it seemingly is getting harder and harder to do, and we keep getting recommendations of denial from city planning. We want to advance this town, and the way we can do it is to be able to help bring old buildings to the best that they can be. And I say this again, enforcing the strict application of the UDO on older buildings is a practical difficulty in itself. It's in the BZA's purview to be able to help guys like us to make old buildings great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anybody else from the developer team who, or from the petitioner's team who would like to speak? Yeah? Okay.
My name's Steve Engel.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Steve Engel. I've been one of the owners along with Ron Stanhouse. He's my business partner. We've owned the upstairs pub and businesses in Dunkirk Square since 1984. We originally started Opie Taylor's back in 1983 when it was up by the Bluebird and ran that for 10 years before we sold it. We bought the Crazy Horse in 1986 and still have it, the Alley Bar in 2004. Along with the Bluebird, we ran Jake's on North Walnut from 2006 to 2012. We've been in business in Bloomington a long time. Here at the upstairs pub, when the Kilroy's group abandoned their portion of the building during COVID, we expanded into that, took that opportunity while we were closed and took a chance and expanded into it. And we've been upgrading the building and the front of the building since then. Also during COVID, we had the opportunity to acquire a large scoreboard that hung in Assembly Hall and the field house even before that from the 60s. And the whole point of this project is we're going to put this scoreboard in behind the bar on the west wall. And it's going to be flanked with 6 panels of basketball floor that IU played on in the field house on 7th Street. That goes back 100 years, those panels. To do this, it requires us to raise the roof 6 feet. As part of that, we're upgrading the windows and everything else that goes with it. So variance number 1, the front of the building, essentially what we're asking is the front of the building exists is cedar, it's painted cedar, and we want to add 6 more feet of painted cedar that matches the building that faces Nick's. The second variance for the west wall is cement block that is entirely hidden by the Rubicon building. The Rubicon building overshadows Dunkirk Square. There's a 4-foot little alley in between, but none of it is visible from the street or really to anybody. And all we're looking to do is extend that wall so we can raise the roof with the existing materials. My opinion of Kirkwood, particularly the 300, 400, and 500 block of Kirkwood, is it's kind of its own little village down there with individual little businesses that create a unique university commercial environment. And the buildings down there, whether it's the Tudor front of Nick's or the Von Lee, with the roof on the Von Lee and the materials, the neon on the Von Lee, or Dunkirk Square, which I know a lot of people around town when Dunkirk Square was built in the 70s thought it was unattractive. But it was certainly unique, but over the years, it's become part of the personality and an overall part of the personality of Kirkwood. And as a 3-block area, it is a very unique, and I'm very proud to run a business down there as part of it and trying every year to do improvements to make things better for that area. With this, again, all we're asking is to extend 6 feet of the existing material so it matches what's already there without putting metal or stone or something that doesn't match the rest of the building.
Thank you. Okay, do they have any time left? 6 minutes. Is there anybody, this is the final opportunity for the petitioners to speak? Are you guys done? Okay, so then we are back to the board for additional discussion and questions. And did you have a question? Did you have a comment, Katie?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the audience that when we say practical difficulties, when the language in the code says practical difficulties in the use of the property. So people often hear that and they say, well, it's not practical to put a new material here. It's not practical to make me use something that's more expensive. The language in the variance criteria is specifically talking about practical difficulties in the use of the property. And so that might be why there could be a history of denials from staff when petitioners feel like there is a practical difficulty, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Questions?
Yeah, one for the staff. Could you explain a little bit more in detail the desire not to have it as wood? Is that a fire issue, or what's the UDO rationale for not wanting more than 20% to be wood on that facade?
I cannot speak to the reason that was placed in the code when it was. I don't know if Eric can.
Yeah, so certainly it's a desirability for durability as well as look. Durability is top of the list there. Certainly as you look at buildings that are constructed along Kirkwood, everything that is new that's happened along there has met all these standards for the allowed building materials. And, when you look at kind of the east side of this particular building, and you see the wood that has been placed over times, and you see it kind of rotting and falling apart, wood is just not a durable material. It just doesn't last, and that's, so the materials that are in the UDO are reflective of the community's desires to have durable, long-standing, highly aesthetic materials within some of our corridors. And those standards change, from certain overlay districts within the downtown. But Kirkwood corridor here is one of those areas where, as well as the Courthouse Square, where there's a higher standard for the materials that we want on buildings, but also, to create some uniformity for how buildings look along an area.
I just have one other question. This is for the petitioner, too. I want to make sure I understand, because I'm looking at, I think, a current photo of the portion above. Am I looking at the right one? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. I'm looking at a current photo of the portion that's above the Z&C restaurant. And is this the intended design here, that diagonal wood? Okay, but the current one is not like that. Is that correct? Or am I? So essentially, you're going to take off what's currently there? Well, that portion, yes, that portion.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. So let me just ask the whole question so that yeah. Yeah, stand at the microphone.
You have to speak into the microphone so that it's.
But let me ask the whole question, which is, what I'm looking at is, first, let me back up and say, I really like what you're going to do with this space. I think it's great. Yeah. So the real question is, how do we address the variance issue? But the design and everything, I'm very excited about. I think it looks dynamite. But I do want to understand, in requesting the variance, I'm looking at the current facade, and the current facade looks like it needs to be removed in order to put that new facade of wood on. Is that correct?
Well, let me explain it.
Could you explain it at the microphone so people can hear?
Right. Well, I was going to try to point to
and you have, well, there's one there to your left if you want to point to it.
Okay. The existing windows are here and here and up here. And what we're doing, that's existing. This is remodeled.
These two are different.
Well, I know, but this is the remodeled version. Okay, so this is replacing the existing windows with fixed glass, and there's two windows here. Well, what we're doing is taking out all this area and putting in glass and aluminum overhead doors that will open up 7 feet high, and then have two Juliet balconies that are 8 feet wide each that overlook Kirkwood. So they'll be able to open these doors and it'd be all open to Kirkwood. And people can stand out on the Juliet balcony with their drinks and so forth. So I thought that when we took this existing horizontal siding that was in here off, that we would replace it with a sloped to match the roof.
I looked at it different ways, and that was my best guess of how to make it, the design more pleasing.
Okay, so thank you for that. I was trying to just get clear in my head that it looks like you will be essentially kind of redoing the facade, the wood on the
Correct.
facade. You had mentioned in your presentation that there are materials like that are metal that mimic wood.
Right.
So you could also be in compliance by using a material that actually mimics the look that you're trying to achieve, correct?
We could, but it would be introducing another material that doesn't even exist at Dunkirk Square. And I personally, as an architect, think that would be kind of insulting to the overall design.
Okay. Yeah, I have no real questions about the cement on the side because the presentation seemed to indicate it's going to be facing a wall. So that doesn't seem to bother me. I just want to make sure I understood the front. Thank you for that.
Right, over here is there's, well, you can't even see it. This wall is part of the space between that and the Rubicon building, so it kind of covers up the opening. There's about a 2.5-foot opening or 3-foot opening.
So, yeah, that makes sense to me. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Those were the
Okay.
I have a question for staff. Is LP siding an approved?
Yes, I think what you're referring to there would be cementitious siding. So it is allowed as a secondary material. So some of the elements that the petitioner has mentioned, you know, the wood is allowed as a secondary material, meaning it takes up less than 20% of the facade. So, you know, as you look at the top portion of this building, you know, certainly on the east end above Jimmy John's, you see it's all made of limestone. And then on the west end of this building, as they showed, you know, there was a stone face. So you know, this building has incorporated a lot of different building materials throughout its history of work that is being done. So it is possible that, you know, with some of these other materials that are on there that are approved and are allowed, you know, they could use some wood or cementitious siding, but it would just have to take up less than 20%.
Thank you.
So Katie, when you did the calculation, did you count only the additional part of the building mass, or because it's being re-sided, did you count that as well?
So we would count the entire upstairs for the entire building, not just, you know, we're not just looking at the magnifying glass of, you know, this corner of the building, but the entire upper floor of the north elevation. You know, what are the building materials that are present along that elevation? And then so that's what that 20% is based on, or would be based on.
Okay, so it's not based on what percentage more they're adding?
No, it would be based on the entire whole north elevation on the upper floor.
And you look at it per elevation?
Yes, so just the north elevation, you know, not factoring in the east elevation or south or west or anything like that.
And a minor material can be on 20%? What's the minor?
Yeah, so a secondary material just can't take up more than 20%.
20%. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Do I have any more questions? I think I am questioned out. We've gone to the public, so we're back for action at this point. Does anybody have any thoughts, or what are people thinking?
Do we approach this as two different variances?
We could.
Or just one? Two different.
Yes.
One on the wood and one on, so one on the north facade and one on the west facade?
Correct.
Okay.
Wood on the north facade and concrete on the west.
Concrete on the west.
Okay, so they're two separate variances.
Yeah. And the reason why I asked that is because I think on the west facade, I don't see any issues of granting a variance when it's, you know, it's not even seen from the public. It's something out, I mean, it's in between two buildings, and it will be the same material. It will look cohesive. On the front building, on the north facade. I think there can be some creative ways to use allowed materials, allowed siding in there in combination with wood or whatever it is that they can do. I mean, of course, I don't have the design, but.
Well, to move this along, I'll make a motion then on the first part, which is I move approval of variance V-03-24, providing for the use of the petitioner's proposed material for the west concrete wall.
For the BZA, obviously you'll need to make findings for that particular.
Findings for that would be just because it faces an existing wall and
Okay.
will not.
So condition number 1 would stay the same. And then, I'm sorry, finding number 1 would stay the same. Finding number 2, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the development 1 and 2, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. And I think that the second finding can also remain. It's just the final one. So we have to say here that due to the existing configuration of the building, which is up against, practically adjacent to another building on the west side, we find practical difficulties in adding a new material in this location.
Does that suffice, Eric?
Yeah, so what I've kind of heard here is peculiar condition is found in the area of the proposed concrete block is completely obstructed from view by the adjacent building, and then practical difficulty is found in relation to introducing a new material along that west wall.
Yeah. Thank you.
That should be the motion.
That should be it. Okay. So, do I have a second?
Do we call it Part A or Part B of the variance? I don't know how.
There are two. So there's a case number and then a variance number. I'm not sure. In the upper right corner, it says V-03-24 and then variant VAR 2024-02 023 0023. What does that signify? What is the second one?
At this time, we have 2 numbers for the same variance. So those 2 numbers are for this variance, and both of the variance requests are falling under
Both of them?
Both of them, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to do 2 separate motions, though?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that would probably be cleanest.
Yeah, but as worded, though, will it void the second part, though, because it does refer to V-0324? I mean, do we need to make it more specific, because I am talking about only a portion of the actual petition?
Right, so you would make a finding to deny the variance for wood siding on the north side of the building, and then a separate motion to approve the use of the concrete wall for the west wall of the building.
We could do it in one motion.
If somebody wanted to do it that way, yes.
That would
If you
be
feel
good.
like there is a consensus vote.
We can do it, though, as individuals, though, right?
Yeah, we
Either
can
way.
do it individually.
Okay, I just want to make sure that once we take a vote, and however it turns out, it just doesn't affect the second part of the vote. That's all. I mean, if it's okay with the board, I think we should just do the one so that we have that off the board, either denied or approved.
Keep it separate.
Keep it separate,
Yeah,
I think.
agree.
If you concur.
I do.
Okay.
Okay, so
We don't have a second, though, do we?
So we need a second?
Second that.
Okay. So we're ready for a vote? Unless there's any further discussion? No? Okay, we're ready for a vote, please?
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Clapper.
Yes. Okay, so the variance for CMU, for the CMU wall extension is approved. And then we're back to the wood. Yeah.
For the petition, what is the second
Oh, that's the,
rendering the material?
oh, I'm
That's
sorry,
what-
we have to swear you in. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We know you, but you need to swear in.
Very familiar.
You kind of came out of nowhere.
Okay. Yes. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Only this time.
Okay. There we go.
Yes.
Please proceed.
Okay.
Can you hold that up next to him so he can
Eric,
reach the microphone?
Eric put this up to show you that it really, you know, it's the same walls. We're just raising them 6 feet, and putting metal there, which is allowed, is going to look nuts. You know, I mean, just going to look nuts. And putting stone up there, does that make any sense? I mean, it's obvious. And one other thing I'd like to say, cedar, this is not pine wood that deteriorates the way that Eric was describing, that it's a material that doesn't last. It's cedar. It's already lasted 50 years. I won't be here in 50 more years, but I got a feeling it'll last another 50 years. So I want to take that out of the hunt. That's cedar wood, okay? So you can see that having stone, which is what staff originally suggested, stone or brick, and Katie can verify that. Stone on the second level.
I do not make suggestions on materials. I can only tell you what is prohibited in this case.
I thought you said Jackie Scannon said that she would prefer to, okay. Okay, it's here nor there, but to have wood on the lower level and stone up above, I've never seen it. I don't know, maybe there's some place on the planet that has that, but you know, it just wouldn't make sense. And to introduce metal, that obviously doesn't make sense. So we're going to propose to take off cedar. The walls are still going to be the same walls, just 6 foot taller in the front there. So, okay, that's all I've got to say.
Okay. So we're back to action, for action. I feel like the character of this building is tied pretty strongly to the cedar. It's, you know, a rough sawn cedar, and it's kind of, you know. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to say personally, I think that the sort of there's a organic kind of quality to this building, and it and sort of the cedar is part of that. It's part of the character of this building, and so I think that is an appropriate use here. I could see us crafting some. Again, it's the hardship of the use. There really isn't any. I mean, I want to put a rationale forward, but I do have I think we're kind of limited on what we can do. I don't know what other people are thinking about this. The appropriate, it's not really appropriate, but if there's a way that we can craft a finding.
I'm of your thinking that we need to find a way to work this through. I do want to make one statement, though, which is I don't want to live in Williamsburg, Virginia, or whatever. I don't want to live in the past. So the idea that we don't ever update the downtown is, to me, not a really valid argument, because we're always advancing, or else you wouldn't be inside the bar making it better. You know, it'd still be the same bar it was when it was originally built. So, I mean, I appreciate the idea of holding on to the past, but at the same time, I also understand what the city's trying to do, which is to assure that the things that we do build are more durable, last, and become a part of our character. Now, some of us like it, some of us don't like it. That's a different issue, but I do want to kind of at least make that point that I wouldn't simply make a decision based on, well, that's the way it's always looked, because then there would never be an opportunity to change and grow and be different. We're not the same Bloomington we were even 20 years ago, let alone 50 years ago. So that's one point. Now, with that said, I agree with what you're saying, which is I do think that it could easily be done. We could find a way to make this work, but what I'm struggling with is what's that finding, other than historical context, which I just said wasn't.
Staff, if it was historical, because then you know it's a simple, solution, because you're trying to go with what is there.
Exactly.
You know, and you have to respect what is there, and that's why I was asking. So this building is kind of in an awkward place because it's almost historical, but it's not.
Not quite.
Yeah, so it's in a.
Is there any guidance in the Kirkwood overlay? Any architectural guidance on that?
Well, so the downtown vision and infill strategy plan, you know, is one of the guiding documents that we have within downtown. And then also the comprehensive plan deals with downtown design and overall community goals. You know, and as I briefly touched on with the materials, you know, we want to create buildings that will last the test of time, that are well constructed, and that, you know, present a cohesive design and a series of elements and so those are the documents that we have to kind of work with, and those are what we base the materials on. You know, besides countless planning commission and city council meetings, where the materials and architecture was heavily critiqued with lots of opinions. And this list is very, you know, extensive for the reasons that I've kind of mentioned of what we want to accomplish along these areas. You know, as I've also mentioned, you know, it is possible that they can do wood and cementitious siding on, could be a good amount of this, but they would have to make sure that that's less than 20%. So, you know, as you mentioned, Mrs. Clapper, it's certainly very hard to tie a variance from architectural standards to a property, because there's, you know, nothing about the property inherently that doesn't allow you to be in an architectural standard. You know, especially, you know, if the petitioner is saying that they could do something that would meet code, that really makes that really hard.
I think part of the point of the cedar, I think, I like the historical, and I agree with Joe, like the historical component of this of trying to preserve, especially against, you know, some of the new construction, the new build that's out there that we know there's a lot of opinion about. I think this is trying to preserve something important, special, but also I feel like the alternatives aren't good at all in terms of longevity for like stone. Stone has to be mortared. Stone has to be, there's pieces that could fall out. There's a weight element as well. You know, the metal's reflective, so I think it's not just the first part, but the second part, but these alternatives, not only do they're not cohesive with what the aesthetics of the building are, but they're not, I don't see the practicality of cedar, the longevity, you have cedar over something like stone, where stone has to be, there has to be tuck pointing done over years. I think it outweighs many of the other alternatives that they even would have in this position, so.
I think that's really insightful, and that's the problem I'm having, because I agree, I think that would be great, but, you know, petitioner says, well, we could have something that looks similar using a metal-based or cement-based product that looks like wood. That's problematic in the UDO. How then do we achieve a finding that's going to overcome the UDO? Because we can't just outright override the UDO. We have to provide rationale, right?
I want to ask, what kind of materials do we have that mimic wood or cedar that are approved?
Well, so the list of primary materials that mimic that, you know, is very limited. So when you look at these lists of prohibited materials, you know, the things that are kind of in there by default would be brick, limestone, metal, you know, as your primary allowed materials. So, you know, other than metal.
Correct.
I'm
that
sorry?
It's the problem here is the quantity, because it's over 20%.
Yeah, and we don't know, you know, exactly, you know, it's obviously well over that. You know, if they were to do certain elements of the building with the corners, for instance, with the permitted, they could be really close, because there's a lot of the building that is constructed of permitted primary materials. You know, we saw the sides for Jimmy John's, and then other portions of the building that have stone. So they might be really close. I mean, in terms of, you know, just a few elements here to get you to that 20%, and then they can do the wood. Correct. So we would factor in, like, as I mentioned earlier, you know, all of the existing portions of the building that do have permitted materials would all count towards that.
Correct architectural response is to do a masonry base, to add the stone to the bottom and do the wood on top. I mean, that would be the most, from an architectural point of view. I mean, that would be a strategy to do with it.
How do we phrase that? How do we phrase that in a
Well, we
finding?
can't, I mean, that's just a suggestion I'm just throwing out. I mean, that's neither here nor there. But I don't know. I think that we would love to be able to say that there would be a way for us to grant this, but I just don't see how we can craft a finding for the third one.
So just to clarify what our business is here, like, we can't defy the UDO without providing a rationale.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure, I'll say this, so what Barry is saying is that even though all four of us may agree that cedar siding may be terrific and we would all support it, we're not allowed to violate city code without being able to say why. And so that's what we're talking about here, just so everyone understands what we're trying to do. We have to come up with a finding that says this is the reason that this can use wood instead of having to apply to the UDO. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not merely the fact that this development has been historically sited in cedar, because that doesn't really affect how the development is used. And so that's kind of where the difficulty, the practical difficulty has to be related to the use. And unfortunately, siding doesn't really impact the use in the way that we could craft a finding for. So I don't see a way for us to grant this.
And I would state too that, let's say that there is a decision made not to grant the variance. I agree with the president that it would be much better to find a way to do what you said, which is, can we find a way to maintain that historical look by adding some elements? I mean, I agree with that. I mean, personally, I would like to vote to let it go through, because it makes a lot of sense and I have no problem with that, but I'm not able to do that based on the bylaws of what we're allowed to do here.
Okay, so does anybody have any further comments? Because if not, I think we should craft a motion.
Yeah, I think the only comment I'll make is that sometimes the defiance of logic is very challenging on this commission. And I think we can probably all agree this is a primary case of that, where the logical piece far outweighs, I think, what may be potentially forced to do. Yeah, it's hard. It's very challenging.
The best thing would be if we were able to have the city provide a variance for cedar, because of the distinct quality of the wood. You know, that would be, I'm just saying that's not in our purview, but that's where we're at.
Are you talking about Land Commission, Ed?
I don't know.
That to the UDO?
Yeah, because as we've gone through many cases like this, there are a lot of things that, as Tim said, seem to defy logic, and so we can't make the change, but we can push back and say, this is something that needs to go backwards to the planning to make those changes, because the argument of the cedar lasting for a long time certainly makes a lot of sense to me. So I guess what I'm saying, Tim, is how do we find, what kind of guidance could we also provide to the petitioner to say, this is how we think we can get to where we want to go? I'm not on planning, so I don't know what the options are.
Yeah, I'm not exactly.
Well, yes, would you like to speak? That is up to her.
Excuse me, one second. I don't know at this time.
The rules are, if we ask a question of you, you can answer, but we can't do it at this point because of the way it works, and if Barry's okay with it, so.
Did you want to ask a question?
No, I don't know if ask a question.
Okay.
Can I make
Sorry,
one
Mr. Kamen.
small comment? No.
Not at this time, but thank you.
But I'm going to ask a question.
Yeah.
To you. Well, I guess to staff, if they change the facade to accommodate cedar in a smaller percentage with some other material in that facade, that would be acceptable?
Wood is allowed as a secondary material on floors above the first floor of the building, and the definition of a secondary material is that it composes 20% or less of the facade. Yeah.
So I will ask a question of the petitioner, and I'd like to have you address the question, which is, do you see a way for you to implement more than just the cedar into this design to get closer to the UDO or to meet the UDO? Do you see that as an option for you? Can it be done and still maintain the character of the building? You're the architect.
What about asking them to leave just the last 6 feet? Do they metal thing? I don't think so. That'd be a compromise.
I suppose we could check on it a little bit more closely. Quite honestly, I've been kind of confused about that 20% and exactly what it entailed and what it didn't, because there's so many elevation changes. I mean, consider that the elevation of the wall behind it where the deck is. And back in here, it's stucco. I mean, I don't know exactly how you'd figure it all, to tell you the truth. I mean, I did work with Katie and I tried to estimate it, and it seemed like that wasn't going to work. But it really boils down to, we will put metal siding on it, and that complies with the UDO. But we're asking you to make an exception and allow wood instead of metal, because metal is just introducing another material. And Katie, maybe you can help me here. I believe that there was something in the UDO that allowed the planning director to kind of override the UDO if she chose to. Isn't that correct? And I just assumed that that was probably the same prerogative for the BZA, that they could excuse it.
We don't have that discretion. It sounds like there is. Now, we could craft a I don't know, we could we could say we feel that this is most appropriate, and perhaps it can be reconsidered. I don't know, but variances have a very high threshold, and one of the difficulties with the way that our code is put together right now is that there's not a lot of wiggle room, and so even something as minor as this has to come to us, BZA, for variance, which requires a very high level of substantive, documentation for us to grant it. So we have legally a particular purview and ways that we have to justify what we're doing, and this kind of thing does not fall into it very well.
I see.
And it is unfortunate.
Okay.
In this case.
And to answer Michael's question, yes, the only relief really from this in the code was because the removal of materials and the replacement of new materials requires that any new materials placed on the building are compliant with current code. So the only relief from that really is that statement, which my computer died, the statement that says that if it's a partial, if it's renovation of the building and a partial, update of the building that the planning and transportation director can choose to waive the requirement that new materials put on the building, if it's something about if it's against the character of, if it goes against the character of the existing building. So if it's a partial renovation.
So I think then, so that's not really for us to decide, but I think we could sort of make it known.
Make some changes, and our director wants to reanalyze that for compliance with the UDO provisions that do give some flexibility. That is certainly something that we can look at a staff level with any revised changes.
Okay, and can we as BZA weigh in on that, or can we, I mean, our discussion here today.
Your purview as an advisory body, you simply review variance requests and approve or deny those. The Planning Commission makes oftentimes a resolution or something to staff, but that's not usually in the BZA purview.
I think our discussion can stand for.
Could we just make a motion with prejudice?
No. No. Okay, so I think that it does, looking at this as a renovation job where they're adding just the 6 feet of height, to me that seems reasonable and I think could be considered as in a different.
So as a BZA, we have options to deny, approve, and do we have another option? So they don't have a negative stance against them?
No, we can deny, we can approve, or we can continue. Those are our 3 options.
So if we continue, do they have time to talk to the department and see, to the director of Plan Commission and see if they can get that resolved and maybe withdraw the variance?
The request?
Yeah.
I think our recommendation from staff would be to have a finding tonight. If they want to make a change, if the petitioners want to make a change and have a revision and then have our director review that, that option is always there. The board is not, it's not like a architectural review board where we say, oh, this is better, this is close. There's either practical difficulty or there's not.
Yeah.
And so that should be the findings.
Right.
What if we have no motion on this second part? What if nobody wants to make a motion?
Then it gets continued.
Automatically?
I mean.
It has to be, it would be continued until there is action.
I was asking that for Flavia's, so that's a third option. For, against, or
but
no one makes a motion.
It's not going to accomplish anything.
Want to give them 30 more days to work on it?
Whether we deny it or approve it, it's not going to make any difference to the.
Okay.
I don't see any difference. Just one quick thing.
The practical difficulty that I think we can latch on to is this. This is stone. It's heavy. You mentioned that, so that's
okay.
A practical difficulty. And Eric said the main replacement materials would be brick or stone. Or metal.
So I think we should vote, and I think we're limited in our purview. And
okay.
I mean, I don't see any other way around it.
Yeah, I was just looking for.
Yeah.
Make sure we knew what the options were. So what? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Flavia.
Just looking for options.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we really are down to we have to have a motion and it has to be for or against the variance. That's our option, because we can find no findings. We have no findings.
We don't have any findings.
And if I understand this correctly, there is a way for them to go back to the city then and look for approval from them to move forward? Is that what I heard?
I think that there is an option for further discussion with, to either meet the UDO with their material choices, or go back after our conversation here tonight and ask for reconsideration from the planning director. I think those are the two ways forward.
I would say a third option, although it would not give them what they want now necessarily, would be to, you know, petition the city council and the plan commission for a change to the UDO.
How long would something like that take, do you think, practically?
Well, I mean, we're in the process right now doing our annual amendments to the UDO. So if there is some member on the city council at this point who wants to take up a amendment to revise this, and that's something that can be handled at the council level.
The UDO is...
So, I mean, to answer your question, you know, 2 months, 3 months maybe? However long it takes for this to, you know, it just was approved at the Planning Commission, I think a week and a half ago. So once we certify that to the council, they have 90 days. So very latest, you know, 3 months from Monday or so.
Would it be fair for me to say that sounds like a reasonable path to take that for the petitioner? Since we're not able to give...
A path, I don't, you know, reasonable is obviously subjective.
Okay.
The UDO is dynamic and it is updated every year. So it may not be something that could be accomplished this year, but there's always next year.
And that's only through city council.
I'm sorry, I did not.
The only way for that to be proposed is through city council.
Yes, so a city council member would have to bring forward an amendment.
Okay, are we ready for action? As ready as we'll ever be? Okay, okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I motion that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed findings for V-03-24, variance 2024-020023, and deny the requested variance in regards to just the front facade with the cedar.
Do you have a second? According to the findings in the staff report.
According to the findings of the staff report.
Okay. Have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
What's the vote then? Yes means denial?
Denial.
No means?
Yeah. Okay, we're ready for a vote, please?
Ballard,
No.
Burrell,
No.
Clapper,
Yes.
Throckmorton.
I want to understand. So no is to, yes is to deny?
Yes is to deny.
Well, I'm on the no side myself, but we'll have to have another vote, right?
We'll have to have another vote.
Yes.
Okay.
Vote is yes.
So the motion,
Yes, so the motion fails.
the motion fails. So we don't have action yet. Okay. So we'll have to make another motion. I don't know what motion you guys want to make since you voted against it. You got to get yourselves elected to city council.
While you're thinking, essentially what we're looking at is, despite the fact that we agree that this makes a lot of sense to put.
I know, it's
Yeah,
frustrating.
Besides that, we can't, without a finding, vote for the variance. So the question is, and we've given the petitioner an avenue in which they could take by going through city council, which is the appropriate pathway. What kind of motion could we make for that?
we have to deny it. There's no other way.
Okay. Do we want to make the motion in second again?
So we're going to do the same motion again? Can we do that? We can do the same motion?
I mean, I guess I would have to defer to our legal counsel on that. You know, if you've already made one motion intuitively and it failed, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can,
But-
if the board wants to make the same motion.
Let me ask, Ms. Lacy,
Yes.
could you please give us some guidance? If a motion fails, what happens? Like, can we?
I think the board can it's a little bit unusual, but I think if the board were to want to have the motion introduced again, you can take another vote on the same or substantially the same motion.
We can do that.
Yeah, yes, I think so.
I just want to make sure subsection E, if this is right. Actually, subsection F, no zoning petition which has been disapproved by the board shall again be placed. So does this count as disapproved if it's a tie?
No, that would be a denial. This was just a failed action. So
Okay,
it
that's
was not
what I'm
an
asking,
actual-
because that's the language, so. Okay, so it does look like, based on our own bylaws, we can do it.
Okay. So I will entertain a motion.
I will make the same motion. Board of Zoning Appeals adopts the proposed findings for V-03-24, variance 2024-020023, and deny the requested variance based on the proposed findings on the packet.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Can I have a vote, please?
Burrell?
Yes.
Clapper?
Yes.
Throckmorton?
Yes.
Ballard?
My vote will be yes, but I think as part of the planning commission as well, I just want to state on the record that I will plan on going to the fellow commissioners to have further discussion, as Ms. Burrell is on that as well, for figuring out an avenue, alternative avenues of trying to get things done this way. So my vote is yes.
So the variance is denied. The other one is approved, and that concludes this case. Thanks. Yeah, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
All right, hopefully this is working now online? Yes? Okay, great. All right, we're gonna try this again, third time's a charm. So this is for a property at the southwest corner of 3rd and Grant. This was in the downtown, I believe the downtown core, or I'm sorry, not downtown core, downtown edges. And so this property was developed in 2017 with a mixed-use building. It contained a ground floor non-residential space and 2 apartments on the west side. At the time that this was approved in 2017, there was a requirement in the UDO for 50% of the ground floor to be commercial space. So that is different. You know, there are different levels of requirements in the UDO for commercial versus non-residential space. So at the time, this was required to have 50% commercial space, and the Plan Commission was able to do waivers at that time. And so they allowed for 2 ground floor dwelling units on the west side of the building and allowed for a reduction from that 50% to allow for this commercial space. I think it's about 700 square feet, about 757 square feet at the corner. There's also a parking garage within there, and then the upper floors are all residential. So the Plan Commission approved waivers to allow that. Since then, the code has changed in a couple different ways. One of those is this is no longer required to have commercial space in any proportions whatsoever. However, ground floor dwelling units do have to be 20 feet back from the front. And so the petitioner would like to convert this entire commercial space into a new apartment. So you can see the current floor plan that I mentioned has that leasing space. That was what was shown when this was approved. It was going to be an on-site management office or leasing space for whoever might be moving in there. but it's sat empty. So the petitioner would be remodeling that to create one 2-bedroom apartment. So as you can see by the exhibits in the staff report, this would be at the corner of the building. It would not be 20 feet back from either the 3rd Street or the Grant Street facade. So the petitioner is requesting a variance from that standard, from the use-specific standard, to allow for this entire portion of the building to be converted into an apartment. So we did not find that there were any, that this would be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community. However, the second criteria, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included, would be affected in a substantially adverse manner. We've gone through this, I think, on 1 or 2 separate petitions recently, where we talk about the intention of this requirement is to not have dwelling units right on the ground floor of buildings, right on sidewalks. It goes into what is the kind of public space that we want to create adjacent to sidewalks. Having ground floor dwelling units immediately adjacent to sidewalks is not that use. Oftentimes it is a very inactive use. The buildings are designed in a completely different way. Blinds are drawn. It's just not the use that we want to have within our downtown. So we do find that there is adverse impact there because this deals with the overall use and value of the pedestrian experience and space along both street frontages. And then even more specifically, the third criteria, that the strict application of the terms of the UDO would result in practical difficulties, and that the practical difficulties are peculiar to the property in question. Again, we do not find that there is anything unique here that does not allow for that to be non-residential space. I think that is just clearly exhibited by the fact that it was constructed with non-residential space. So the petitioners, while it was not this specific petitioner, but the previous owner, they knew that ground floor units weren't allowed. The building was purposely designed and built to have that non-residential space, but the petitioner now wants to just convert that into a residential. So as I mentioned, this is not about a certain percentage of the ground floor that has to be commercial. This is not about the viability of commercial uses along this corridor. It is strictly related to what is the use that we want along the pedestrian experience. And so apartments is not that use that we want along apartments. And again, this kind of goes also into, the design of buildings, retrofitting apartments into commercial spaces doesn't create the experience that we want along streets. If you're going to put apartments in and have entries or some manner, having buildings purposely designed for that is different than turning a commercial space into an apartment. As we did not make findings for the second and third criteria, we are recommending that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed findings and deny this variance request, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Can the petitioner's representative please step to the podium and sign in?
Hi, I'm Tim Cover with Studio 3 Design.
Tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. So you decided to save the best for last, and if you would, if you want to get done even quicker, we'll just go right to vote, and all right. 27'6". Remember that number. There's going to be a test later, so try and hold on to it. The variance, as Eric pointed out, is really down to can we put an apartment within the first 20 feet of the front of the building. 2/3 of the building currently has that. It was, as Eric said, built that way, agreed to. When it was agreed to, there was also a work-live office use that was going to go in that first floor location. The building was sold, that individual backed out. The space is set empty for 3 years, and we'll get into that a little bit more. From a variance being injurious to the surrounding area, I know staff agrees it does not harm the surrounding group. It in turn actually benefits the area because you've had a empty, dark corner for the last 3 years. We're asking to put somebody in it. From a adversely impacting the value of the surrounding area, again, this area, Grant Street, is residential. 3rd Street, yes, has some commercial along it. Are we having a negative impact by, I guess, completing the residential fabric that's already existing down that street? I don't believe so. So the real meat of it comes down to the 3rd item of what's peculiar about our site and what practical difficulty is it causing. What's peculiar is, number one, there's no parking. The street parking on Grant is permit only for residential. All right, no public parking allowed. 3rd Street in front of our building, there's no parking. No public parking, no residential parking. Second, after the building was built, a median was added in front of Grant Street. That median prevents anybody from turning off of 3rd Street that's coming from the west from turning in and accessing the site. If you're coming from the west, now you're going to go all the way down the street. You're going to turn around, come back through neighborhoods only to find that there's no place to park unless you have a permit and you are a resident. That was never part of what we were aware of, as far as we weren't part of the decision to add a median. We weren't asked if a median was going to impact our building. It was done. It was put in by the city, and as a result of that, from a use standpoint, we'll talk about how the peculiar circumstance of a median being added impacts us practically. From a site separation, the idea that retail wants to be there to enliven the corner. This building is unique in that because of the grades along 3rd Street, you have a sidewalk that follows the curb line of 3rd Street. And actually, if you want to throw the Google view, just that was up there, that first live shot. You've got a sidewalk that follows the street. Then you have a wall. And you can, there you go. You can kind of see the rail going from a 42-inch high guardrail all the way across the length of the property. And that rail sits on a wall that goes up probably about a little over 3 feet at the higher end, down to 0 once you get to the corner. So you've got a 42-inch to 7-foot barrier between you and the building. To me, after that barrier, you have another sidewalk, and then you have the building. That has a very residential feel to it in terms of I'm on one side of the sidewalk, I have a fence, and beyond that fence is the residence. It does not have a commercial setup or feel. How's that all start to weigh into practical difficulty? Well, it ties into the fact that, again, there's no public parking. Over the last 3 years, there have been over 30 inquiries on the space. Each one has walked for the same reasons. There's no place to park. Access is difficult. It's a small space. The space is about 1,000 square feet. And if you remember that first question, 27'6", well, that's the length of the area, the street frontage that we're talking about. And to give you reference, you see a chair pulled out in the line here. So from that chair to me is the area we're asking for a variance on. That area is behind a fence. It steps back 5 feet from the fence and then another 5 feet to the entrance. So you're another 10 feet back on a space that is supposedly set up, wants to be, to enliven the sidewalk area. It's also an area where, quite frankly, you don't have a lot of people walking other than the residents that are living there. So basically, if not residential, then what? Staff will say you can throw a amenity space in there. Call it amenity space for the building. In the past, when we've argued for that, to fulfill a need for commercial space, we were told no, it doesn't apply. There is a lot of amenity or a lot of commercial space available all around the area. Are we going to fill all of it with gyms and free space, basically, and or leave all of it as empty, blank storefront? We, as staff stated, knew what we were getting when we got approved, and there was this commercial space in the corner. We've worked very hard for 3 years to fill that space with office use, retail use, banks, small restaurant, not, kind of more of a walk-in and grab, and each attempt has failed. All we're asking now is to convert what has sat empty into what the rest of the building contains as residential that matches what's down Grant Street, which doesn't harm what's along 3rd Street. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Carmen and let him share a few thoughts.
Mike Carmen, also representing the petitioner. Okay, all right. Tim's covered the issues, so I don't want to just keep plowing old ground. So a couple different ways to think about those issues. The staff presentation with regard to the second criteria about does not substantially adversely affect use and value of adjacent properties. Staff's comments on that didn't address damage to use or value of adjacent properties. It only addressed we're not getting what we want. And those are not the same thing. Not getting what you want in the way of what would be in that particular location doesn't mean not getting that is harmful to the use and value of adjacent properties. And I would submit that it's not. What harm to the use of any other property is it, whether that's an apartment or a non-residential use? It has no impact on other properties, and certainly not a substantially adverse impact. Whether that's an apartment or a non-residential use does not affect the value of any other property around there. What does affect the value of the properties are those things Tim has talked about. Accessibility, pedestrian and vehicle, is hindered at this point. Anecdotally, I kick myself, maybe my memory is getting worse than I want to admit to, but I'm tired of coming down Grant Street because I do it rarely. But I'm tired of coming down South and Grant Street to hit that barricade and have to go west and turn right because I can't go straight and I can't go left and I have no choice. I mean, it's an irritant. I know it's there, and yet I keep hitting it, and it is a hindrance. But you look around and you see the Dillon. I mean, what's it been? 10 years, 12 years of nearly 30,000 square feet of empty first floor space, 2 tenants, 30,000 square feet of space, 2 tenants in all these years. The city has its own experience with empty storefront. How many years have we had empty first floor on the 4th Street garage on a prime arterial street, North Walnut, where you're, one of those streets that is supposed to be conducive to attracting business people downtown, and it's got empty storefronts and has had for the years that the 4th Street garage has been rebuilt. And there have been other samples, and you have dealt with this issue many times. So, from an argument standpoint, you're hearing old news. So, the staff did not provide findings with regard to those two, second and third criteria. I think the facts, if you just consider what's involved, and you can find that the use and value of the adjacent properties are not adversely impacted by this variance, allowing a non-residential use or converting a non-residential space to residential use. I would submit as part of that, and Tim alluded to it, what if applying strong, and as Eric alluded to, and those kind of things are detrimental to that, what is the detriment presented by an empty storefront? So the adverse use to the adverse impact to use and value of adjacent properties should not be an issue, and ask that you would find that it does not materially impact adversely the use and value of adjacent properties. Moving quickly then to the last criteria about peculiar difficulties. Eric slipped in a word, that's not disparaging comment, he just used it as everybody does. Everybody that talks about that third criteria uses the word unique. It does not say unique. Unique by definition implies one of a kind, spatial, unusual. From everything else, it's unique, and that's not the criteria. It's practical difficulties, which is a wholly different standard than being unique. And Tim alluded to the practical difficulties, and I would suggest 2.5 years of empty storefront demonstrates the practical difficulties of utilizing this as for a non-residential purpose, and that the conversion to residential use would be appropriate. It would get rid of the blank storefront. It's walkability to campus from there. It does have parking available if it's residential use, although that's a neighborhood zone, so we still would have to deal with the neighborhood zone in Grant Street. So we're talking about not allowing residential use against a residential neighborhood, against a residentially zoned road that's limited to residential parking. I mean, everything begs for that. So I would ask that you find that there are practical difficulties in the use of this space as required, the non-residential zoning use, and that those practical difficulties would be relieved by allowing the conversion to residential space. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are to the board for questions of petitioner and staff.
More of a statement, though. It appears that that area has changed quite a bit because of the two buildings across the street in particular. And I guess this would be a question to the petitioner, but you were saying that Grant Street's mostly residential, but just across the street, that's all business between 3rd and 4th, isn't it? It's all business frontage? And this is just a continuation of it?
The stretch we're looking at in the
I'm
photo.
sorry, I missed that. Say again.
The image we're looking at as far as the residential stretch and residential parking is straight down the street through here.
Yeah, the other way.
Yeah.
Across the street, though, across the street, it's all business.
Across the street, there are business.
Yeah, I don't think there's any residential between 3rd and 4th, is there, on Grant? It's a corridor of business, isn't it? And the reason I'm asking is I think what looks like this is just a continuation of the commercial space up to that point, because from from 4th Street to 3rd Street, it's all business, especially with the new like Brew Burger and everything in that area, all the other restaurants, and then just across the street is this commercial space. So I just want to clarify that it is kind of connected to an existing commercial corridor.
It is on the corner between two.
Yeah, okay, that's.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that the question for staff, the crosswalks that were put there that are right in front of the building, that's really meant to concentrate pedestrian traffic across the street at that location. There's like
pedestrian safety measure that was installed by the city.
So there are a lot of pedestrians. That's
Yes.
a corridor that they're coming from the south to the north and
Yeah,
back
so
and
the
forth.
heavy residential neighborhood to the south, there is a lot of pedestrian traffic moving through Grant Street, especially as they move to campus, and I would imagine, that accidents, both vehicular and pedestrian related, were a factor in that. So, given the amount of traffic moving through here, that's why those improvements were installed.
So we've heard a number of variants of this type, requesting a variance of this type over the years, and I know that there was going to be some consideration given to changing the code, and I think there was a study done.
Yeah, so, so what you're referring to is something that related to the percentage of commercial space that was required on the ground floor. We did do a lot of study for that on space within the downtown. Ultimately, the Planning Commission did not take that up and make any changes, and there are no changes that are proposed in terms of the current round of amendments. But again, this goes back to, they're not required to have commercial use here. It just can't be apartments. So it could be, a study lounge, it could be a leasing office, it could be anything you want, it doesn't matter, it just can't be an apartment.
So it can be a resident serving use?
Yeah, it just can't be a dwelling unit.
Okay.
But it can sit 20 feet behind the front of the building facade?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Can you have a a residential area that it's 20 feet behind the front of the building facade?
Yes, so in the downtown,
In the first
you
floor.
you can have ground floor dwelling units, they just have to be set back 20 feet from the front facade.
So can we measure, so I know it's probably doesn't sit 20 feet from the facade, but can the petitioner tell me how far the facade of this proposed residential space will be from the curb? Do you know that distance?
There's a few different dimensions here. So from the sidewalk, actually probably easier with the picture of the building. Yeah. So where the fence rail is, that's the property line. The building is set 5 feet back from that fence line. The corner of the building, if you carry that straight down, there's some glass that's about 15 feet of width. That is part of what would become the residential unit. Then the building steps back another 5 feet underneath, so the rest of the unit steps back from at that location. So from property line, you're 5 feet to building, and then from face of building, you're another 5 feet back to the half of the unit. Does that answer what you're looking for?
I was just trying to see how it feels from the road, and from public.
I didn't follow that. How far is it from the curb to the glass that you just outlined?
So from the curb, there's about the street line, you've got about an 8-foot landscape area, then another 5 feet of sidewalk, and then that gets you to the property line, which is the railing that you see. So call that 13 feet, and then another 5, so you're 18 feet to the face of the building. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out.
But because this, correct me if I'm not, but this property, since it's a corner property, is subject to the 20-foot setback from both sides of the.
Okay, so it affects both facades.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is a corner property.
Yeah.
So can you put that picture back up? What's the approximate distance on Grant side?
You're right off the sidewalk.
On that side, you're more closer to 10 feet to the face of the building. It's a thinner landscape strip, about 5 foot, and then 5-foot sidewalk.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I did have one other question too. Go back to that parking one. Is any of that parking, the overhead, the the diagram, which is number 6, I believe. Was any of that parking originally designated for the retail, or who has this parking?
The parking is 100% for the residents.
Do we know if any of it was originally designated for retail?
I don't believe any retail parking was required.
So commercial is not required
Okay.
any. Certainly the petitioner or the property owner could allocate space to the commercial if they wanted.
But most likely it wasn't in the original design.
Yeah, it probably was not.
What was the city's thinking on addressing that issue of the left-hand turn from cars coming from the east being westbound, trying to take a left? How did you envision that corner working? Go to the next?
Well, I would imagine, as you have 4 lanes of traffic that are moving and trying to cross 2 lanes, there's a lot of conflict areas there. And I would imagine that there were a lot of accidents that were happening at this intersection, and so that's why this specific one was highlighted.
How do you see the traffic flow though proceeding? Do you see it going down to that next stoplight?
I guess, go west down to Lincoln and then come back around.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? How does the parking work? That's typically when you do a development, you can count the parking that's immediately adjacent to your building as part of that parking count often. So here, if it's designated for residents, then they don't get to use that parking. Is there some recourse that the owner of this building could have that would be public parking?
So that would be a change to Title 15. If you wanted to change the on-street parking allowance to go from residential to, timed or some change like that. Nobody's petitioned, I guess, to make that change here. It could be.
Since parking seems to be a big concern about the desirability of this space, and there is adjacent parking right next to the building that they can't get their hands on, it seems that it's silly that they shouldn't have access
Sure.
to that.
And the petitioner is undergoing a very similar process for another project that they're doing on Kirkwood in Washington, where they are requesting a change to the on-street parking. So certainly that's something that they could go forward with here if they wanted to, make the space more viable. But again, I come back to this. It's not required to be commercial. I don't want to try to get wrapped up into the discussion of is this a viable space or not viable. It doesn't have to be commercial. It just can't be an apartment. They can choose any number of things that they want to do with it.
Just a quick question for the petitioner. What have the owners of the property considered as an amenity space to go in there? Could there be, I don't know, computer area, lounge? Again, an amenity that the trade-off is going to be because you add this amenity, it adds value, where the value add in this is you're trying to get, obviously more residents in there. What considerations have they done?
So the owner has other property right in the area that has a lot of the, it's got a workout facility, it's got other amenity space that residents are all basically able to use. If you turn around, I can't speak for him in terms of whether he would pass costs to residents. If you turn around and say, I'm going to plug a gym into the corner here. Typically, in the residential developments, you pay for a amenity like that as part of your rent. So, coming in and saying, okay, we're going to stick that use in there, now you're also turning around and saying, well, we're going to stick everybody in this 30-unit building with the cost to have it, versus basically, again, it's a residential building filling that space out.
But they've done it in other developments that the owner's done. He's put amenity spaces in
It has been.
It's worked.
But honestly, they're also much larger developments.
Spaces.
They're 100-bed plus developments versus a 30.
Okay, so the offering might not be pertinent to the size?
Yep.
Okay. One other quick question. They stated about there would be no other changes if this variance was approved. There would be no other changes to the exterior? Or would there be, if we go back just to that main picture?
No. Basically, the one edit to the exterior would be the entry door into the space, but we're not changing material or the door itself. It's just the entry point would come around the corner. You'd see it more in the floor plan. So in this elevation or image, the entrance is actually kind of in shadow back there.
Yeah.
We would look to move the entry door around the corner to basically create a much more usable living area within the space, as opposed to having the door down where it currently is.
But leaving the glass?
But that's not, basically, we're not looking for a variance to do that. That is, unless I'm not sure that would designate a variance, yeah.
But leaving the rest glass?
Yes, it'd still stay glass.
Are there concerns of safety? If it becomes residential, to me, looking at that as residential and your glass all around, that could be maybe a safety consideration, like?
We have, well, I guess it's a matter of perception on safety in the area. There's definitely, one, it's all laminated safety glazing as far as somebody walking up and busting a window. But visually, yes, you would probably have blinds if somebody wanted to close off in the evening or things of that nature. We have 2 units right next to it that are ground floor level units that have not experienced any, break-ins or problems along that line.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I think, Tim, if I understand what you're asking, is the 2 units that he just mentioned being next to it, they're fairly well enclosed with traditional windows. And this is full floor-to-ceiling, side-to-side glass, which I think you're asking about the issue of being able to peer into someone's apartment on a ground floor as opposed to, is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
I think we had a similar variance request several months ago on the property on 7th and Morton, where they were trying to get the same thing, and part of the discussion was about all the glass space being an issue, potentially for anybody looking at that as a residence, like, would you want surrounding glass versus the ones behind those being protected more so?
Yeah.
It's just designed as commercial space.
Right, because it was.
Yeah. I guess you would have the same if I'm walking on the other side of the street looking at the building. The entire corner is floor-to-ceiling glass. A resident, if their windows are open, has the same issue as a resident on the first floor.
Do we have any other questions? And we are to the public. Is there anyone here who would like to comment on this petition? Anybody online? Nobody online. Nobody online, okay. Then we are back to the petitioner for any final comments. If you have any time remaining, which I believe you must.
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay, no final comments, then we're back to the board for action.
What would be the finding on this?
Pardon? Well, we would either deny it. I think this is a tough one because, initially the person the group that built the building asked for a reduction of commercial space so that they could have more units, and that was granted. And I think that the fact that this commercial space is maybe smaller that it loses some of the flexibility that some of the larger spaces would have had. So, you know, there were some decisions made early on which created a smaller commercial space, but this is the way the building has been designed. And I think that there are specific goals of the UDO in the downtown in particular, and we're not talking about all of Bloomington, but this is really a downtown heavily pedestrian area. And I guess while I think there are a number of site issues related to the front of the building along 3rd Street, I think the way that this building is predominantly experienced by pedestrians is along Grant. And that's the longer expanse of glass that everybody's walking past that, you know, works in with the pedestrian network. So I think that it's inherently a conflict. I'm inclined to deny the variance.
Yeah, and you know, my question is the same as the previous variance that we heard, which is I'm struggling to find what kind of finding could support, you know, approving the variance.
Approving a variance of this type?
Yeah, does anyone on the board have that to consider? Foundation for finding?
I mean, other than what they kind of wrote in the petitioner's letter or statement.
Like, they can't rent it.
Page
But
83.
the idea is that it doesn't need to be a retail space. It just can't be a residential space.
Sure.
Yeah, so that, again, the finding would only be applicable to a partial use of that space.
Right.
Because if they used it for tenant amenities, the issue of not being able to rent it is irrelevant. So that's why I'm saying, what kind of finding would there be in order to allow a variance?
So I tend to agree with Barry on the predominant side that will be experienced from the pedestrians will be the east side, which is the largest glass exposure. So basically, we're making this into you're living in an aquarium. You know, it's going to be glass all around.
I'm on the same page as Barry in terms of I'd be inclined to deny it. I just wanted to make sure I understood what we could possibly come up with a finding.
I think.
As an argument for.
Well, yeah. I think the fact that it doesn't have to be a rental space, it doesn't have to be a retail space, I think that's critical here to our understanding, because the arguments that are being made is that they can't rent it, and that this owner has no use for it that fits within their, you know, it's space. It could be, there are all kinds of uses if they, you know, if they didn't want to allow their tenants to use it or were having trouble renting it. There are all kinds of things that one could do with the space, but that's not for us to, you know, determine.
Yeah, I think that's my point is in looking at it from the petitioner's point of view, saying I'd like to get a variance, I can't find how I would provide a finding in order to allow us to do it. And that's why I was asking the other members of the board, does anyone else have something to consider before a motion?
Yeah, because I don't think this falls into the other categories of petitions we've seen where it's about the commercial requirement, and whereas this is not. And that's what I would say would be the consideration to turn this into some type of amenity space. It's 1,000 square feet. I'm sure there's buildings out there similar in size that come up with something to fill those spaces, which I almost guarantee the owner would offset. That's just logic there. So, I think, right, that puts a lot of kind of options on the table to choose from, to put in there, to fill it. That's, you know, not somebody living, like Flavia said, I think that's an issue I have, like living in a glass containment.
But I do think it goes to the higher level of, you know, it's impossible to put forward a motion to approve the variance because we don't have any valid findings. So we're back to the position of know, we have to make a motion, but I don't see a pathway to be able to grant it. Does anyone else?
So, Eric, just as clarification, so for the downtown, the 50% or that requirement, it's no longer in place? It's the 20-foot?
No, so there are situations where you are required to have 50% of the ground floor as commercial space, but this is not one of them. You know, we've constantly reevaluated, you know, where in the downtown those spaces are critical, and this particular area was actually removed. You know, as I mentioned, when this was approved, it was a requirement. The Planning Commission gave them a reduction to allow less of an area, but now it's not even required to be commercial, but there is the requirement that the ground floor dwelling units have to be 20 feet back.
Okay. Okay, so we're back to the board for action.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to deny variance B-06-24.
Seconded.
Okay, any further discussion, thoughts? Okay. Ready for a vote, please?
Clapper.
Pardon?
Sorry, Clapper.
Yes.
Throckmorton.
Yes.
Ballard.
Yes.
Burrell.
Yes.
Okay. The variance is denied,
I do have one.
and we are adjourned. Do you have one?
Before
Oh,
we adjourn,
I'm sorry. Can we
I do
rescind
wanna,
that?
Put on the record, I had asked Jackie if we could follow up to the status of the parking lot across from the Graduate. It's the parking lot that's across from the fire station that belongs to the Graduate. Is it possible to provide us some details to what our actual variance, or I think it was a variance that we did a few years ago, because my understanding was that parking lot was supposed to be temporary, but it's been there for a number of years.
I'll look into that.
Yeah,
I just felt like it was a use variance to allow that as parking.
It
for
was,
the
but I
hotel.
thought it was temporary, that's why.
Yeah, I'll look into that and we'll follow up with you.
Thank you, that's it, that's the only new.
Okay, so then we are officially adjourned.